There was a war that lasted decades with the labyrinth, and it ended with the victory of those above the ground. After their defeats, tens of thousands of labyrinth masters freed their prisoners. Among all these prisoners, there were babies born inside the labyrinth. Their mothers were already dead, so they had to be raised with monster milk. A man spots a child and alerts his boss because these children possessed otherworldly powers and were too strong to be considered simply human. Two old men discuss the child being born in the labyrinth and that she likely came from the lowest level. As humanity called them, they were dungeon babies. The child who emerged was taken in, and everyone warned to be careful because she didn't know how to control her powers. They called them dungeon babies and said to keep an eye on him. One of the reporters says they are about to film the second floor of the labyrinth, while another responds that there is nothing left there. Arguing, they highlight that it's a chance to become millionaires because the babies are not well known and they would be the first, even though they were questioned about it. A reporter responds saying she did a little investigation. Asked if he knows how obsessed dungeon babies are with them. He replied that apparently that guide is the only dungeon baby who refuses to go near the labyrinth where he was born, and his level was never revealed. Answers by asking if it's because he is weak, which is why he also hired guards just as a precaution. The reporter responds that maybe he could be something else entirely, leaving suspense in the scene and saying to go quickly, but was contradicted for being there for only 10 minutes. Also gives warnings about the dangerousness of the place and about the guards not using their weapons against the beasts. The guards, hearing they should avoid conflicts, contradict the guide, saying he worries too much. One of the guards mocks the dungeon babies, comparing them to Buddha babies, saying that no one cares about it and they will protect all the babies. The guide thinks to himself that the guards understood nothing and that while the guards talk, someone is being torn apart. He also says that Geyser is not just any place. While a reporter is startled by a loud noise and asks what that could be, suddenly a huge monster appears among the rocks of the place. The guide says it's a horned beast, often found on the first floor of Geyser, pointing out that it is injured and it would be better to leave before the smell sticks. The guards at the ready calm everyone down and assure them they will protect the team. The lead guide of the reporters yells desperately not to shoot. Very attentive, one of the guards shouts fire with the intention for everyone to immediately shoot the beast. They begin shooting frantically at the monster. The beast is hit and emits an enormous sound that is deafening to everyone. Shortly after, it falls to the ground unconscious and severely injured. Everyone is surprised looking at everything that just happened. They look desperate and confused. The guards are incredulous for having killed the beast so easily and mock it, saying it was nothing. Soon the reporters are impressed with the situation while everyone mocked the beast, saying that everything alive and moving can die. Excited, the group wanted to move forward, but the guide warns them and is contradicted and mocked because the problem was already solved. Suddenly, everyone hears a huge sound in the cave. They ask what sound that is, and the attentive guide responds that a predator who heard the shots would be on its way, and it would be better for everyone to leave quickly while it is still far away. One of the guards shouts that they would fight more. Says they would probably be able to defeat it with a tactic because the other fell with just a few shots, and uses the value of the beast as an incentive. In discussion, they say the dead beast is worth millions, and that if they kill more of them, it will be more than 10 million for each one, while the guide is disappointed with this goal. The two stare at each other for some time. He tells the guards to do what they think is best and that everyone else will stay away because they had no weapons during this. The guards celebrate thinking about the money. Everyone else was instructed to follow him away, even one of the reporters wanting to film. A more angry order was given by the guide. They say goodbye to the guards, saying they would see them later and ask where everyone should wait if everyone was okay after searching for the monsters. The guide suddenly runs and everyone asks to wait. All tired of running, stare at each other and breathe for a while. One of the reporters asks where they are going and says the footage is all messed up. Responding to her, he says no more filming. Kim says they are all leaving even though questioned. The questioning was due to the guide's words to the guards earlier. The reporter realizes the reason he doesn't approach the labyrinth is that he actually doesn't finish the sentence, leaving it in suspense. He stares at her for a few seconds and is called a coward, ending the suspense. She says for everyone to go back even though questioned, and responds it's for the reason of filming the guards fighting the beasts. Angrily, she also says that everyone spent a lot of money to be there, and that if they leave now, there will be something she leaves in suspense. A mega noise is heard from behind them. They turn and watch. Again, the sound echoes through the place. It seems to get closer to everyone. They get more and more frightened by it. The guide tells the group to calm down and keep walking because they can't let the predator notice the group is divided while being questioned about everything. He also says the nearby predators heard the shots and that the first beast that was killed was just prey. She asks the leader if he's going to let the guards die even knowing all this information, and he responds saying that if he tried, they would all be dead. He also says the smell of blood could be on the guards' clothes and that they could have been caught with them if everyone ran. The desperate reporter tries to remedy the situation, but the guide asks for calm. She says that if the guards could be convinced, things could have been different. The scene gets a bit heavier as a sound emerges. The sound was a voracious predator. Suddenly, the animal appears among them, and roars loudly at the group. Right after, it bites the cameraman's camera. Kim and the reporter watch everything with a look of despair. The predator voraciously chews the cameraman. He's been asking for help. His life is ended. The guide wonders if it is a wolf monkey, and the reporter asks why they are on the first floor. He looks desperately at the monster after everything that happened. A whole group of predators is revealed, and the rest of the explorers are voraciously devoured while wondering since when the monsters near their location. Kim quickly tries to fight the monsters, stares at them and gathers courage to run. Runs quickly towards one of them, prepares to attack it with a precise blow, looks intently into the monster's eyes and strikes it hard against its body. The monster roars in pain and despair, and is soon struck in its face, falling to the ground already lifeless. Suddenly, the other predator tries to strike the reporter with its fists. Seeing all that, Kim heroically tries to act, quickly runs towards the monster with a look of vengeance and strikes it. He picks up the reporter on his shoulders and says he will run at the pace expected of a dungeon baby. Also warns that some ribs might break, but for her to hold on tight, running quickly. The two move away from the monster. Very injured, the predator is confused about what happened, tries to strike the ground, but no one is there anymore. After running so much, the two sit down and rest. After moving away from there, he tells her it must have hurt, but she did very well, and that the monsters must be chasing them. After that, she asks why he let the other group members die. Crying a lot, she questions him, saying he is strong enough to use a blunt knife, so why did he let them die? He tells her she seems to have understood everything wrong, and that he was only hired as a guide, not a guard. He also asks her if there was anything in the contract saying he should fight, being responded to with the lives of the people who died. Ironically, he responds, "Welcome, but Geyser," arrogantly asks if she was the one who hired this bunch of idiots who had never been there, and that they did everything he said not to do, which is why they died. The guide protagonist says that if everyone had listened to him from the beginning, they could have minimized the damage and wouldn't even have been attacked. So she asks why he only saved her, and the protagonist asks who will pay him if she dies there, and that he is still working and she needs to pay him and he will keep her alive. Suddenly, a golden light appears. The two look at it attentively. It is noticed that what is in front of them is a labyrinth emblem. He says he ran in any direction, but still they ended up inside the labyrinth, and says they need to leave right now. They try to run but fall into a huge hole that opened in the ground. They scream desperately while falling from a great height. Falling to the ground, he looks at the ceiling with a fixed gaze. Quickly tries to get up from the ground, hears a very strange noise coming from his own arm, and realizes his left arm is broken. Even so, he remains optimistic and says it could have been worse. The protagonist looks for the reporter and doesn't find her, and says she wouldn't survive a fall from that height and his payment is gone. Soon he also hears another predator. He says he's in trouble and that he fell into the center of a labyrinth. He wonders what place that is that shows no signs of activity and seems like an abandoned labyrinth. He stares at the labyrinth emblem. Suddenly, the snake coiled around the emblem looks directly at him and decides to wrap around his body to attack him voraciously. Tries to bite him with its enormous fangs. Manages to bite his arm over his coat. He looks desperately at what just happened. This was the 18,230th serpent that had just been released. He finds it ridiculous and says he can't die there now. He will be the one to inherit this sinister underground and tries to say something about his death but faints. Here's to accept that sinister underground. He wakes up from the fainting looking fixedly at the ceiling. Tries to get up from the ground he was on and he celebrates being alive after all that, saying he definitely saw the poison spreading his body. Realizes his arm is healed, no longer broken. Not only his left arm but his entire body. He analyzes the place and says that it looks very similar to somewhere near the entrance of the first floor, and suddenly he spots the surviving reporter lying on the ground. He runs towards Yoonju. Analyzing, he discovers she is still breathing, but her wounds are very serious and severe. Entering desperation, he says he has no first aid kit there and no one else around to help. A lot of blood comes out of Yoonju's mouth. He says there's no time to think about all this if he continues there doing nothing. Desperate, he begs her to hold on a little longer, please, that they are almost there back at his house. The protagonist announces he has arrived. Entering, he hears something coming from the television. It was a news report announcing an accident that had happened that same day at 9 in the morning. Also said that 7 of the 9 people present at the scene had died, and it was presumed that it was an ambush by a horned beast. Continuing, the news talk about the 2 survivors while Kim comments on how quickly the news spreads. He turns off the television and says relieved that at least the part where the guards didn't listen to him is on the recorded video, and calmly says that if it weren't for the cameras, he would have been fined. He heads to his sister's room and says he left part of the payment in her room and that she must have already seen it, while he quickly thinks of bringing her another package. But on the way, he comes across his sister and mutters in surprise that she's home. Even angry, he asks her if she was crying. They stare at each other for a few seconds in suspense. The protagonist quickly thinks that his sister just saw the money in her room and that the money left her surprised and emotionally happy because it's a large amount. Quickly, Kim hands her the package and tells her to use it for her wedding and not to ask how he got the money, because it didn't come from something bad. Suddenly, their father arrives at the scene of the conversation and soon asks the meaning of what he had just seen in front of him. Kim responds to his father with a question because he's surprised that today he is home on a break and is reprimanded for being disobedient, because he had heard that his son was risking his life to earn money. For this reason, he had left work and come home. Then, in an angry tone, he tells Hyunji to return all the money Kim had given her. Again, angrily says to return the money to her brother. The guide receives more questions from his father, who asks if the protagonist thinks his parents are so useless to the point of risking his own life to marry off Hyunji. Kim responds saying he doesn't know what his tutor is talking about and uses an example that he only received the money by working, while his father ends the conversation. Then he reveals he is not the protagonist's biological father, but is being greatly underestimated by him, and asks if he thought he wouldn't find out. Kim apologizes to his tutor at that moment. He looks around fixedly, very sweaty and nervous. His sister returns all the money he earned. He tries to give the money back to Hyunji, feeling a bit embarrassed. Disappointed, the father gives a lecture saying he thought he had raised his son well, but in reality, he had grown up quite selfish. He also says he already knew that raising a child is a difficult job, while the protagonist tries to explain that he gave the money to Hyunji because he wanted to and had nowhere to spend it all. His tutor responds saying that she wouldn't accept money that risked her brother's life, and that the protagonist is also part of the family and should not upset them like this. The father asks him to come in and rest, and also not to do everything he did again. Kim responds affirmatively, a bit embarrassed. Adopting an orphan from the dungeon, also known as a dungeon child, gives you a lot of money. And because of this, there were many incidents where people adopted children just for the money and abused the child, resulting in the parents being killed, which is why they are lucky, because they know a real family. But the family is having problems because of his sister's wedding. He looks attentively at his hand. He reveals a tattoo on his wrist whose origin he doesn't know. Kim touches his tattoo, which turns green. Something green appears in front of his eyes. By tapping it, data about a supposed Naga labyrinth is revealed. He says he discovered some things on the internet, and that the green panel with the data looks a lot like what appears in games. It is discovered that the labyrinth is probably referring to where he was bitten by the serpent, and he wonders if an abandoned labyrinth shows him as its master, thinking it is evident that the portal is also something from a game, and that it has something new on it. Apparently it wasn't there before. Touching it, he is thrown, falls to the ground, and looks around. Through a portal, he was teleported back to the labyrinth where he was attacked by the serpent. He stares intently at the serpent and thinks that place is the same as before. Confusing himself because that place is a bit different again, he stares at the snake. Suddenly, the serpent appears again and is so fast that the protagonist can barely follow it with his eyes, and he has to use his strength from the beginning. He engages in a fight with the serpent and immobilizes it with a cloth, and mocks it, saying he wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Thinking to himself, he realizes that his plan won't work for long because the serpent is strong enough to tear the cloth and that he needs a weapon to fight. The serpent says he is the 18,230th liberator of the serpents and will inherit the underground and sit on the throne of Naga. He looks intently at the snake again. Also says that Kim is too small and inferior to bear the weight of the crown, but that it's not there to delay the flow of time, so it will also consider it destiny. The protagonist questions the throne of Naga and what the serpent is talking about, and if it is the master of the labyrinth. The snake disappears, wishing luck and glory to the new king of Naga, while Kim asked it to wait, and says not to play with it because he hates labyrinths. The protagonist thinks to himself, muttering that he hasn't even looked at labyrinths for years and that he only went once to get the money for his sister's wedding fee. Also thinks that in his life, one annoying thing happens after another, and that he should have listened to his parents and avoided labyrinths. He looks around because he heard a noise. It is noticed that it comes from the portal through which he had been teleported. Suddenly, his sister's voice echoes from the portal asking if they can talk a little, and he lies, answering for her to wait because he is changing and wonders if it was the same portal he crossed and didn't imagine the sound would also cross. Even so, Manji enters his room even though he asks her to wait. He prepares to return home and quickly jumps into the portal. Kim says it felt like his body was breaking, but there was nothing wrong with him. His sister asks what the strange noise from his room is and why he was all sweaty and hadn't changed yet, making him shy. Suddenly, a voice saying legendary comes from the protagonist's computer. Hyunji asks if now he is playing. He responds that he's not and it's just a stream. She responds that she didn't think her strict brother had an interest in something of her age, and he wonders why he is considered strict. Hyunji responds that Kim doesn't have hobbies and that when he was a child, he would just zone out in his room for hours and hours, but he asks if that's how she sees him. She isn't wrong because after leaving the labyrinth, the protagonist couldn't stop thinking about that place and he wasn't used to such peace. That calm was somewhat uncomfortable for him, and that's probably also the reason why other dungeon children are still pushed towards dungeons. After these thoughts, his sister asks what's wrong. She looks very sad at her brother and apologizes to him after everything. because she didn't know he had gone back to the labyrinth because of her but was wondering what was happening. He says it's all right and there's nothing for her to worry about and tries to give her the money again. Realizes the money is no longer in his possession and remembers it's in the cloth jacket that immobilized the serpent and asks his sister to wait. He'll be right back. Looking at the portal, he sees a demonic being with his jacket, taking the money. He prepares, staring at the little devil and the portal, staring the fixed, confused look. The protagonist desperately thinks about his sister's money. Then he disguises, saying that he's fine and that she shouldn't worry, that he was just so curious about the game that he forgot about yesterday's events. Trying to end the conversation, Kim tells his sister that he would like to enjoy his first and new hobby, and she responds affirmatively. The protagonist quickly returns to his room, thanking her, while his sister is left a bit confused by it. Listening through the door of the room, Kim hears Hyunji say she's never seen him so excited before, and he thinks, apologizing to his sister. He closes his door and quickly locks it to return to the portal. He crosses and is again teleported to the place where the little devil was. He runs quickly into the place. Running back into the labyrinth, he realizes the little devil is already gone, and looks for it everywhere and doesn't find it or the money. He finds the green panel again, talking about the little devil and the money, and ordering him to finish the synchronization and activate the labyrinth entrance. Kim is very confused by it. The protagonist asks the panel what the hell it is and why a little devil would steal pieces of paper. He stands in complete silence and stillness, throws his cloth jacket to the ground forcefully and curses it, and sits on the throne a bit saddened by it all. Laments because he didn't know all of his work had gone to complete waste. Touching the marble of his seat, he notices something shiny when pressed. Moving the marble of the throne, the panel reveals more information, and it seems to work just like the tattoo on his arm. He doesn't care much. He stands still, contemplating it all. Thinking a lot, he decides to activate the synchronization because he needs to find his money. He thinks he could also just let it go because it would only increase the countless labyrinths. Then he reasons that maybe he's being dragged into labyrinths just like other dungeon children while pressing to start the synchronization. The panel checks all his qualifications, while the protagonist wonders if it was just to press yes, and that a gate would appear right after that. Thinking better, Kim realizes he's wasting his time, and it would be easier just to dig the ground after the little devil. Suddenly, the panel verifies that he is qualified to be the king of Naga and initiates the synchronization while he doesn't understand anything. A very bright white light appears right there, and reveals that the labyrinth has registered him as master while a voice resonates in his head. The labyrinth is reorganized according to the synchronized data. Again, a strong white light appears in the place, and reveals a huge gate, stating that the synchronization is complete. He stops and observes everything around him in complete silence. Says everything is better than before even though it's still dark and scary. Again, the green panel appears in front of him, and the protagonist realizes there aren't many changes except for the details on the status window. He notices the gate and deduces it could be the labyrinth entrance. Soon, the little devil emerges from the opening that appeared, and quickly enters the labyrinth again to avoid being noticed. Even so, it is noticed and stared at by the protagonist, who soon sees it and asks how it dares to enter. The red horn being thinks that a normal person wouldn't notice its presence and wouldn't even know something passed through there. Desperate, it looks around attentively and worried. Soon, the protagonist grabs the demonic being by the neck just like it did with the money, shakes it frantically up and down. Immediately, he strikes a powerful blow to its face. The little devil closes his eyes with a look of great pain and agony. Kim says he thought it wouldn't dare to come back, then asks for his money back so he doesn't kill the demonic being. Shakes the little devil and sees that the money isn't with it. Quickly asks where his money is and if it knows what kind of money it is. Grabs it by the body again and shakes it. Then something falls from the demonic being while Kim says he doesn't need that money anymore. He stares at the object that just fell from the being. This thing that fell is a terrestrial jewel. The terrestrial jewel is a precious stone found only in geyser and can be buried deep in the ground or hidden inside a rare plant. However, it is almost impossible to find it with known methods, and usually people kill dangerous beasts to obtain them, and they are sold at very high prices. Kim quickly thinks that less than a gram of the stone would be worth millions, and that the stone is of good size and must be worth tens of thousands of won. He shakes the little devil frantically again, and another terrestrial jewel of a different color from the previous one emerges. He wonders about having two jewels there in his hand. The demonic being shakes and manages to break free from Kim and runs quickly into the gate. Regretfully, he sees the being quickly leave. The protagonist thinks it's good enough because he got two terrestrial jewels, but one suddenly shines a very bright white light in his hand. He looks intently at the jewel, shining, very scared. The light doesn't lose strength, and the protagonist continues to look closely, still looking at the strong light of the stone. He wonders what happened while a panel appears in front of him saying he sacrificed a jewel, and the durability of the labyrinth will be restored and upgraded. Jumping in front of him, he wonders by whose order that happened. He tries to grab the stone in his hand again, but it simply disintegrates into dust and fragments. The panel indicates how many hours remain for the restoration and reveals the remaining time for the protagonist to rank up the labyrinth. He looks attentively and worriedly at this new information. Lamenting, he says the stone was worth the same value as a car. 4 days later, despite the concerns, Kanji's wedding went very well with many generous blessings from many people. After much negotiation, he also sold a remaining terrestrial jewel for a very high value of 18 million. He was incredulous at the value of the stone. Even though it was a lower price, it was enough to buy a wedding present that he would give secretly due to his father. Again, the green panel appears, revealing the labyrinth upgrade is almost complete, and he thinks about the value of the stone he used for this improvement. Thinking that it's no use lamenting the past anymore, he hopes the upgrade was worth it. He orders the portal to open immediately. It quickly opens and he enters calmly. He is teleported to the labyrinth and soon encounters information. It is revealed that the upgrade is complete and that the labyrinth has ranked up. Some bad news is also revealed, and it is shown that a nest has been created. The protagonist wonders about a Naga nest. He hears a strange noise coming from the labyrinth gate. It is surrounded by very dense dust, and he wonders what is happening at that moment. A room appeared where a wall was blocking, and that would be the Naga nest. It is very different from what he expected because it is very empty, and he imagined a humid and sticky environment worthy of real reptiles. Suddenly, a huge paw appears behind him. He wonders about the beasts and why it appear out of nowhere. The panel reveals that they are Naga nest workers. They were just cute little monsters and not what Kim expected. They await a command from the king of the labyrinth. Kim admits to knowing very well what a low-ranked worker should do because he also participated in excavations. He orders that 3 work as explorers and draw a map with the labyrinth at the center. Also tells them to investigate risk factors, resources, ecology of the surroundings, and avoid battles to prioritize their survival. The king thinks that originally the cute little monsters should go with guards, but he has none at his disposal at the moment. Orders the rest to dig a hole in the wall opposite the nest and create a warehouse. He reveals he doesn't have high expectations for his workers. Because they are small and bulky, they wouldn't be fast or strong and are easy prey in Geyser, but they are quite impressive nonetheless. Quickly, the group of 3 constructs the warehouse in less than an hour as they were instructed. Meanwhile, a part of the exploration team returns and Kim wonders why only a part has returned. Only one appears and he wonders if the rest, leaving the sentence unfinished and with enormous suspense in the air. He asks himself where the rest of the team is and if they had died on the mission. He thinks he should have gone with them because workers do not exist in the category of military defense force. He reasons that it's a permanent loss or a noise that arises. The sound was another worker arriving and Kim wonders if everyone's okay and if the spoils were many, so they came to drop some off, and that it was an honor to be worried. News saying that the morale and efficiency of 4 workers increased generates celebration among the workers. One of the little monsters hands something to the king. It was a map, and it was updating at the moment. The map brought information about the durability and defense of the place. Kim thinks that apparently he won't need to go out to create the map because there are many things nearby. He looks around attentively while the map is in front of him. Sees that the worker has already gathered quite a few spoils, so it brought anything it could along the way. Kim wonders if he should be grateful for that act. They were things from the last Great War of Geyser, but they were all expired and rusty, and there are no recent signs of people around there. He also thinks that the place is in the middle of nowhere, so it can't be that deep. He suddenly runs towards something he saw. He looks at the object in his hand, very surprised, along with the worker. It seemed to be another terrestrial jewel. He asks the worker if it saw more of these on its journey outside, orders the worker to go fetch all of them and to tell the others to do the same. Kim runs, saying he needs the stone's appraisal. Suddenly, he stops running towards the portal and thinks about what will happen to the workers after he leaves. He reasons that the labyrinth might be attacked while he is not there. The cute little monsters look very sad at Kim with tearful eyes and a downcast expression. He asks them if they are sure there are more terrestrial jewels around there, and is answered with a positive grunt. He responds okay to the worker who confirmed the information. Thinks that it's true the labyrinth is beneficial to him because of the money, or for a real opportunity, he says, looking around. The green panel appears saying he sacrificed more terrestrial jewels, and that the jewels are being replaced by labyrinth energy. He wonders about having traded tens of millions for mere possibility. Says he tried to stop thinking about the labyrinth for the past 5 years, but stepping inside one made him obsessed. He understands why dungeon children are so obsessed and why they are dying by throwing themselves into it. Besides the danger and darkness of Geyser, he felt discomfort while living a bright and safe life above ground, and it wasn't a matter of adjusting and getting used to it. In fact, even living well, all of that was extremely tedious. He says that he was certainly very bored, really. Also says he is the king of Naga and will bring glory to the empire as they wish. It would be such a great glory that it would envelop all of Geyser. He invokes Naga amidst all this. Then the panel appears revealing information about Naga's untouchable units. He could only invoke those informed on the panel, and it would be right to invoke them for the labyrinth's defense. He then thinks about the maintenance fees, and that he cannot carelessly spend the stones he has because he still doesn't have more of them. He decides to invoke a soldier and a Naga maid. An informative appears saying he can sue jewel energy for the invocation. He then hears a noise and observes standing in place. Suddenly, a very bright white light appears right there. Then a large creature appears in front of him. This would be a normal-level Nagma soldier, and Kim is surprised because it wasn't the protector he expected, but it seemed quite reliable. He immediately orders it to defend the warehouse with the workers at the gate. He then thinks that considering the Guardian's appearance, it would have the physique to survive up to the 5th floor. The panel appears again, informing the energy consumed for the other invocation, and also informs that the mystery of geyser was activated and a heroic rank maid was summoned. He wonders, surprised, because it was a very high level. Again, a huge noise is heard in the hall. When a white glow appeared, he ordered it to stop immediately. Then a woman appears in the place, with large ears, purple eyes, and blue hair. Her name was Dominique, and she was of heroic level. She is incomparable to the normal Naga maids because she is a true advisor dedicated to the honor of her master. She calls him master at that moment. She would have called him telepathically. Dominique asks Kim what she should do, and he is surprised because she can also speak. He is speechless and stares at her for a few seconds. He explains the current situation they are in, and is asked about the completion of the tutorial, to which he responds affirmatively shortly after. Dominique asks for permission to view the map of the explored areas of the labyrinth so far and receives permission. It is discovered that there is a vein and a plant with a jewel nearby, so Kim is perplexed that she knows how to use such an object. Excited, she gives advice and explains everything, while they walk to see the map's location for themselves. Along the way, she has various ingenious ideas, like a meeting station under a stalactite cave. She comments about the vein being nearby and also about the jewels present there. Then they find a jewel-shaped plant with a strong survival capacity and no need for maintenance. She gathers the plants that were in front of her. She also has an idea to protect that area because there are many useful resources there. Kim wonders about the red mark on the map and is told that it is a territory of wild beasts. On the map, it looks like a large blocked area, but the workers confirm the presence of monsters there. Dominique suggests creating a hunting area there. Kim responds with a note on how he will call her because her name is very difficult to pronounce. She finds it incredible and extremely something left in suspense, realizes it's normal for a maid who helps with labyrinth maintenance, and is told not to be so modest. Kim never imagined he would have a maid who could advise and communicate with him. He informs her that he came from the upper world and has no intention of neglecting the labyrinth. She understands her master's concern. Since they don't have a core there yet, she advises that he be prepared for anything in geyser and would have to increase the labyrinth's protections, although more jewels would have to be consumed for this to be done. He asks if she can't do it, but is told negatively because only he can perform this type of task. There is still one more question to be asked. What would happen if Dominique's standards were not understood by her master? The Nagas would leave or rebel, but even if a beast harms the labyrinth owner, they couldn't absorb the place. It is revealed that only those chosen by the labyrinth can be its owners. It is also evident that there is no Naga stupid enough to overthrow the royalty that envelops the entire geyser. Kim looks around with a thoughtful and worried expression about the information he just received. He responds positively with a simple okay. Since the two have many duties to perform, they stop right there, and the master reveals his excitement to work with Dominique, and she will do her best. She said the labyrinth could be improved with the harvested precious stones because they have enough. The jewels are used for an upgrade in the place. Kim leaves the labyrinth and goes back to the jeweler for an appraisal of his jewel. The jeweler questions where he found such a high-quality stone because explorers rarely go there lately. Kim heard that the first floor isn't doing well and is affirmed because the wolf monkeys living on the 8th floor started coming out on the 1st floor. The gray-haired jeweler says that the quality of explorers has declined for 5 consecutive years, and because of this, the supply of precious stones is lacking. He also says that infernal spiders are hard to face, but all of them possess jewels, and encourages Kim to kill them for the money. Informs their location and is contradicted because the protagonist won't do that. Annoyed, he says that everything was heard by Kim, and even so, he will waste a great opportunity so easily. He tries emotional blackmail, talking about his family's situation. Kim, angry at that, gives a huge punch that breaks the table into several pieces. The jeweler is stunned by his strength and stares at him with a look of fear and tension. Then the protagonist, very angry, asks if he did a background check on him. Very tense and nervous, the gray-haired man asks Kim to calm down and listen to him, saying it's like working with superhumans. He says they don't have a pleasant nature like his, and if the items arrive dirty in the shop, he is responsible for that, especially the protagonist's items. With the exception of the first, the quality is so good that it's suspicious, to which he responds affirmatively that everything was obtained fairly. The old man ends up saying that most people there lead a hard life, having their parents and siblings killed. It's hard to trust someone who doesn't have something to protect, and they need to take care of their own lives if they no longer value them. But since he has a family to protect, he is interrupted by an unfinished threat from the protagonist, leaving suspense in the air, ending with a warning that he will clearly see what happens if a dungeon child goes mad, resolving the previous mystery, and the other affirms he understands everything. He ends up promising that nothing like that will happen again, seeming to sacrifice his own credibility to check Kim's. Kim leaves, ordering that the money from the jewels be deposited into his account, which is affirmed. Tense and worried, the jeweler stops and thinks about what just happened. He comments on the table broken into pieces and curses all dungeon children. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, panic takes over and the present attempt to run to escape. The infernal spiders have gone mad and everyone there is desperate. They lament that they spent their whole lives digging their labyrinth, so why so much wrath? What is the reason for so much anger and repugnance? One of the present calls out for the Duke of Geyser, while the infernal spider stares at her very angry and wrathful. Kim soon wakes up and realizes it was all just a dream. Dominique calls out for her master. She asks if everything is okay. The protagonist just says he dreamed of some things from the past and everything is fine. There's no need to worry because it's all behind him. He is very thoughtful about what he just dreamed. Everyone stares at him because it was all very strange. The man then gives a light laugh and says it's nothing serious, affirming that the cute little monsters don't seem very labyrinth-like. Dominique then thinks the workers are not to her master's liking, but he contradicts her, saying he likes them but they are a bit strange and not as usual. Kim, thinking it over, realizes it was the cute little monsters that made him calmer. The young man heard that there were infernal spiders in the area, but they aren't in danger. However, other beasts from deeper floors could appear there. He then asked about the status of the update for his maid and is quickly informed of the remaining time, and also about the rank of the labyrinth, which he doesn't quite understand. Standing there, he hears some noises and listens attentively. Information appears bringing good news, saying that the upgrade was completed, along with 6 workers added and a labyrinth core. Again, a very loud sound is heard and listened to attentively by everyone. Revealed amidst a lot of dust is the heart of the labyrinth, and it is shown to be very sensitive. As there is a limit to the labyrinth's power, new things appear, and this time an unwanted weak point emerged. Even if the labyrinth is in ruins, if the master can defend its core, everything can be recovered shortly after. Attentively, Kim looks to his side as a new panel appears. This one brings bad news, including an attack on the labyrinth. Kim informs his maid of the occurrence and orders the number of troops to be increased immediately, because just one soldier won't be able to defend against an attack. He then thinks that he's never heard of horned rats before, doesn't even know the capacity of a Naga soldier, so he decides to summon more of them. The panel appears revealing the options available at the moment, and our boy discovers that there are more types of units. However, they have a higher energy cost than expected, and the currently available Jewel energy is only 21, while there are 20 enemies. He decides to use it all on Naga soldiers while being desperately called. He is informed that if they are horned rats, each fighter alone can handle 4 at the same time, and so he quickly considers the equivalence of the available guards. In the end, a mage has the power of 5 soldiers at once. He is also informed that, however, aside from the soldier, all are very weak in close combat. Immediately, the young man is deeply grateful to his maid, and so he decides to summon 1 Naga soldier and 2 warriors. Quickly, a white light appears in front of him. Everyone is very impressed with it. Colossal monsters summoned appear among them. Expectations were exceeded, and it would even be possible to fight against wolf monkeys. Looking back, he notices something different. The mini-workers are very sad and downcast. Their master soon asks them what happened. Kim is informed that Naga workers are a type of mutation of high-level Nagas. The stronger one is, the greater the chance of such a subspecies being born. The mini-monster has a very sad face for a reason. It is facing what it could have been if it had been born normally. So the little one still follows orders but seems slow and unwilling. As it had more strength than the others, the speed of its work didn't make much difference. The maid was going to take action but is reprimanded for its lack of necessity. He asks for all the Naga workers, including the most recent ones, to be gathered. Even when questioned, he asks everyone not to worry as he won't scold them, just take them on a field trip. He is questioned about the importance of battle and honor, as it is an honorable moment. He assures them there will be no dangers on the way and will protect everyone with all he can. Then regarding weapons, there is suspense. Which weapon should he use to defend himself on this journey? It would be the weapon of a small but great warrior. He then looks at the little one with a look of pride and admiration, ordering immediately for all the Nagas to advance. They will make all the damned rats invading the labyrinth realize they entered the mouth of the snake on their own. Suddenly, several rats appear in front of them. They all want to find the snake's cave. They say there are only digging serpents there, and that the new owner of the place is very stupid because he doesn't even know how to make a decent troop. They boast about their Treach as the smartest and most intelligent. The leader claims to be very good at what he does and will extinguish the last cave. All are instructed to destroy the place and eat their enemies because they will become stronger and hornier. The leader encourages his troop not to flee if they would become predators, but his soldiers don't understand his wise words. He then determines there will be no more digging, orders them to immediately attack the enemies present, and that they should be exterminated, meaning kill them. They separate with a baby worker snake. Immediately says to end their lives. Suddenly, the labyrinth leader heroically appears right there, strikes one of the rats, killing it. An enemy is left watching all that in astonishment. All the Nagas are summoned by Kim at that moment. They are ordered to prove their worth and kill all the horned rats. Desperate, the enemies discover the trap. They become sad and worried about their well-being while their friends are killed. The rat leader is asked by his enemy if he is satisfied with what he sees. He then stares at everything sad and thoughtful. He imagined his human master with a black cape, sharply conversing with him and saying he was born just to dig more and more. Treach will be eaten alive if he doesn't dig because labyrinth owners are big and strong and he is small and weak. His leader humiliates him, saying he is stupid and just like all the other rats. Also says he will have to choose another rat to teach how to become as strong as his own master. Even in doubt, he retracts what he said. Tells Treach that he can become the owner of that labyrinth. He is surprised by that information. He stops imagining and finds himself in total chaos, being asked by his soldiers what they were going to do in that uproar. It is observed at the marble they were talking about. Leading the rats, he says if he swallows the stone, he will become stronger to protect everyone. Says they can still win and that he will get the marble. He imagines that no one has been used for anything useful until today while being protected on the way to his destination. While one of the guardians grabs his friend, he says they will no longer be eaten for pure amusement. Also says he won't bow his head and pretend everything's okay again while his species is killed and eaten. One of his soldiers tells him to run and save the species. He runs, imagining swallowing the marble. He is soon noticed by the blue-haired girl who calls the labyrinth leader. He appears, killing one of the enemies, and asks for a spear from the guardian. Treach jumps towards the marble, saying he will take revenge on the labyrinth owners. Everyone looks at that scene, desperate and worried about the stone. The rat leader gets closer and closer to the labyrinth heart. Suddenly, a huge smoke appears in front of Kim. Then a panel appears saying the altar was attacked and its durability decreased. The rat reaches the marble nest, which is amidst a lot of smoke and dust. Treach stares at the stone with the intention of swallowing it, then asks for freedom for all his brothers before dying with a sharp spear in his back. Kim appears, seeing that the marble is still there. Kim realizes that to break the core, the rat wanted to eat it and asks if this would be dangerous. Dominique responds that the spear would be more dangerous because an animal's tooth of that type wouldn't even scratch the core, even if it got close to it. Kim then thinks that the horned rat sacrificed its companions to run towards the marble and that he will be more careful with the spear next time. Desperate, he realizes he needs to return the spear but is countered because it isn't necessary. The rat he just killed was the leader of all the others, so the enemy's fighting spirit clearly fell, and it would only be a matter of time before they all died. Kim is soon informed that they are very weak and got nervous for nothing because the rats only have numbers but are as strong as the Naga workers. He is surprised by this and receives another piece of information saying that if he captured them, he could make them workers. He then thinks that the rats are like dungeon children in the Great War while hearing that the enemies are weak. But the Naga soldiers are very strong because they can move smoothly without entangling their large bodies thanks to their tails, making them more balanced, flexible, and quick, which would make them difficult enemies to face. Kim looks at the blue-haired woman confused, and they watch the fighting power of the Nagas. Many noises are heard in the cave. Meanwhile, in another labyrinth, the human leader of the rats realizes his enemies are of a heroic level and 4 troops of normal level. He also realizes that the owner might be ignorant because he rushed his summons when the invasion began. Soon a mega monster appears, asking if he sent 20 workers to check the weak fighting power. The man in the black cloak quickly apologizes and is told to capture more rats because they will be replaced. He is asked about the mercenaries and responds that they are taking care of the bloody subjugation outside and is ordered to tell them to prepare for war when they return. He then asks if a war will be left to a mere fighter and is told that he is one of them. Someone said they were descendants of dragons, and even if the blood has spoiled, they can still take care of a weak labyrinth. The monster concludes, saying that it might have a pleasant sight. Then the information panel appears, revealing Kim's victory over Treach, and also revealing that little experience and charisma were gained in the battle because the opponent was weak. It is also revealed that the title of beginner commander was acquired. Quickly, the master is congratulated by his maid, and asks if something is wrong, responding that there are many things out of the ordinary actually. Says that the owner's room was damaged by the rats, but if they wanted to, the workers or Dominique herself could have been hurt. He says it's a good thing the horned rats were their first opponents, and that if Geyser's situation continues like this, being eliminated is completely possible. Dominique gets emotional because her boss is worrying about everyone around him as these are urgent defenses. Kim then orders the Nagas to guard the triumph's happiness deep in their hearts. Says this place is Geyser, where the weak die and the strong survive, so there's no time to enjoy the victory. He also says that the Naga labyrinth is weak now, however, a new chapter begins there. The storage will become a treasury, the territory will be property, and that place will become a mega fortress, made with their own hands and work. Kim says they will all be remembered as legends. Some days have passed since the battle against the rats, and the weapons went to the Nagas' bellies along with the warehouse, making them satisfied and reducing their costs. The 3 workers entered the cave to mine, and Dominique leads them. Meanwhile, the other soldiers went to gather the jewels from the lodging and the plants with an escort. Kim thinks he wants to patrol near a hunting spot but lacks precious stone units for the summoning, so he decides to look at the horns of the dead rats. He takes them to the jeweler and is congratulated for finding these difficult objects and responds that he found the nest purely by coincidence. Then asks if those bones can be sold and is told that everything can be traded and would be used as velvet horns. He is asked if he has any jewels, but responds negatively because it's a struggle to find them. Since that was all, the jeweler decides to pay him as usual. The two stare at each other in silence for a short period of time. Kim is asked why he is quiet and responds by talking about the infernal spiders. He asks where there is a place with the arachnids and is questioned because he missed a chance, but responds that he needs more jewels. The jeweler discovers that Kim needs more money because he plans to sell the other stones he gets from the spiders. In a mocking tone, the gray-haired man with glasses says that Kim even broke the table last time because he didn't want to go and remarks that money really is everything. He then informs Kim that the first advance team has just left, and if Kim wants to join them, he will have to join the main squad that will leave some time later. He asks the protagonist his level and is answered mockingly because he couldn't figure it out even after the background check. He questions how long a man can hold a grudge, and Kim responds by saying he doesn't know his level because he was born and raised on the 12th floor. Impressed, the man with glasses says Kim shouldn't joke about it and is answered with the location and with whom the protagonist had lived in the labyrinth. It is discovered that Kim is the highest level dungeon child in Korea. He then asks why there is so much commotion and is questioned about why he doesn't know. Kim is asked about the strength of a dungeon child, but he says he doesn't know because he never returned after escaping the labyrinth. Things about the world and the situation inside Geyser, he lies saying he doesn't know anything, and that's why he set the condition for information. The gray-haired man tries to explain it in a simpler way. Levels were assigned to all dungeon children according to the floor they were born and raised on along with their level, making him one of the few children from the deeper floors. Floors 1 to 3 are the weakest floors, usually stronger than an adult man, and are typically exploration teams rather than attack teams. Floors 4 to 6 are the mid-level floors, being in the front groups with their strength comparable to superheroes in children's movies. Floors 7 to 9 are the lower monster floors, their strength is obvious, and they are very arrogant. Finally, from the 10th floor onward is the territory of cosmic terror because humans couldn't reach it even in the Great War. There isn't much information about the deeper floors because there are few in the world, so if Kim is really from this floor, there isn't much to explain. So the deeper the floor, the more people there have special powers in strength, speed, and other attributes. Finally, after explaining, the gray-haired man asks if Kim has any special abilities like spitting fire or laser eyes. With his special powers and no weapons, Kim would only need to know the weak points to kill with his bare hands. It is realized that the jeweler's body is entirely made of weak points. Desperate, the gray-haired man says he understood, and then Kim asks if there is still space for him. He responds that if Kim is really level 12, if there isn't space in the group, it will be arranged, and the protagonist asks to lower his level. Lowering his rank will also reduce the payment, but everything will be fine for the protagonist if that happens. With the deal closed, the gray-haired man will send Kim everything he will need, including equipment and schedule, and Kim is grateful. He then asks for a photo and the protagonist's identification document to produce the dungeon child card. Kim asks what this identity is and says he will go crazy. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, the little monsters pay close attention, because according to Dominique, they will be remembered, as true legends eternalized in that place. Soon the master arrives, asking what all that ritual it is. It is actually a first report. Then he is informed by the blue-haired girl that the mining harvest is going well because some jewels have been found, and that other stones were obtained from the subjugation of a wild beast a little earlier, so the master asks where they are. He quickly receives them in his hands from his maid. A loud noise is suddenly heard coming from the labyrinth core. It is revealed that the jewels are being converted into labyrinth energy and that the master will summon another Naga. He will invest in the labyrinth without hesitation because it is not needed in the upper world. He then informs them that he will not be present in the location for 2 weeks and is questioned about the reason for this. He says he has to attend the subjugation of infernal spiders and cannot open a portal that doesn't close in front of his companions. He also says that the harvest jewels take a long time to grow, so he will go after the spiders and everything will be easier if it works out. A Mega Naga archer, the true form of the green worker, is summoned and appears amidst a lot of smoke. He then receives the order to stand guard at the gate with the soldiers. He shows Dominique that the energy from the precious stones collected over days is already gone and is affirmed positively. He leaves only 2 jewels for environmental maintenance. Kim asks his maid if she can adjust the size of the portal from where he came. At the Paju Geyser portal, instructions are given before entering the location. Miss Lee Junyang will be the commander of this expedition and shows herself to be very strict and rough. In 2 weeks, a team of 22 people will subjugate the infernal spiders that invaded the 2nd floor. 7 people will form the attack group, which will line up based on their levels, along with 15 normal explorers. Everyone can check their right arm to know their respective levels. The explanation is quickly finished by the commander. She orders the expedition team to enter by opening Gate B. Everyone obeys her and promptly opens the gate. As they are quite far from the first team, they will walk very quickly, and the commander will pray that everything goes well on the way. Suddenly, one of the expedition members is brutally attacked by a monster. He cries for help in agony. The brown-haired girl quickly notices the presence of the whiptail lizard and asks everyone to be careful with its tail. She then orders everyone to aim at the armpit and front paw, but is soon questioned about the low value of the animal if killed. Two explorers discuss starting with the paws because the yellow-haired one heard that the quality of explorers has recently declined. He also says that all were selected but are easy prey. The brown-haired one replies that it's been 10 years since the war and the useful soldiers have already left. The one with the sword on his back says that almost everyone there would have high debts but is answered negatively because those people fight very well indeed. He retorts, saying it's the same to die up there by collectors or down here by monsters, but it wouldn't be concerning since other people's lives are on the line. Suddenly, the blonde asks a question about what he's seeing in front of him. It's a level 7 mercenary that the boss summoned. She watches him in action right there, and desperately asks everyone to aim at the beast's wounds. Everyone comments on the death of the soldier bitten by the monster. Lee quickly orders them to move, check the jewels, and apply deodorant before the smell of blood spreads. She takes a deep breath and calms down meanwhile. She congratulates Kim on his very good skills. She says the whiptail lizard's skin is thick, so the old man was right to recommend him. She then asks the protagonist to obey orders next time because they might lack manpower when really needed. He asks if he did something wrong and is answered negatively because what he just did can't be considered very concerning. Lee says that even a normal person would face the monster and that they will have fights in which normal explorers won't be able to face them right away. She also says that if he uses all of his energy there, it will be difficult and is answered not to worry, because Kim was worried about his body freezing from the cold and needed to move to warm up. Soon the commander is informed that the troop is ready to continue the journey and is only about an hour away from the save point. Kim thinks he expected all this, but the treatment of dungeon children and normal explorers is very different. Question about the corpse present there, the boss responds ironically to her employee. Still thoughtful, the protagonist imagines that even with people dying, no one even blinks. He stands there for a few seconds thinking. He reasons that the reaction would be different if it were a dungeon child and is glad he didn't care much about it. A week later, at the entrance to the second floor of Geyser, the report is that they had 2 battles against lizards and no damage was caused except for 3 deaths. Meanwhile, someone finds terrestrial jewels and is very happy. Everyone wonders excitedly about how much they would cost. With that size, it would be worth 5,000, so it would be divided into 200 per person. One of the soldiers is sad because it's little money, but is soon reprimanded because it's just the beginning of the journey. They comment about the infernal spiders having stones the size of a wrist with a very rare intermediate grade. The worker wonders how much 2 of these would be and is called very stupid because they would be worth millions for each one. Then he discovers that the workload is worth a few million. Something falls to the ground right in front of him. Suddenly, Jungti calls the convoy leader desperately because something is wrong. It was strange because they thought they had reached the goal, but the snake tracks were a huge mess. It seemed like there had been a big battle, so the girl quickly thinks the first team found the spiders but is contradicted because of the first squad's tracks. They spread everywhere, and while this is happening, she is called again. So she asks why the soldier is agitated. He explains that terrestrial jewels were falling from above, but when they tried to grab them, their bodies wouldn't move in the air. Everyone wonders incredulously if it was a beast because the stones were falling from the sky. The group leader is also very perplexed. After that, Lee orders everyone to prepare for battle and asks for the flares. The ninja soldier quickly takes possession of the flare and throws it as high as possible with all his strength. The light quickly reveals many people stuck to the ceiling of the cave. Everyone looks at that very surprised and with a look of fear, and they wonder if all those dead people are human. Lee is questioned about saying the tracks would be everywhere and quickly responds that the 10 people on the ceiling are just a part. She quickly orders them to leave and regroup while a monster appears behind her. She is quickly warned about it behind her. Noticing the creature, she prepares to defend herself. She quickly strikes the spider with a fatal blow, orders the dungeon children to take the lead, and for the explorer bunker to take action quickly. Very tired, she observes everything, tells them to keep the light source on because the flares are going out. Also asks everyone to move quickly. Kim promptly joins the fight against the infernal spiders. He orders his companions to throw more flares quickly. From the bunker, a flare is thrown into the sky, and with its red light, another legion of infernal arachnids is revealed. A mega spider stares at the blonde explorer. He also looks at her with a look of vengeance and anger, quickly jumps towards her to attack, and thrusts his sharp sword into her body. Another spider fearlessly appears to attack him. He kicks her very hard and calls for Young-ho. The monstrosity flies very far after being struck. Then a blue-eyed, brown-haired soldier appears. He jumps and prepares to strike another enemy fatally. He hits the blow, immobilizing its legs. The monster falls to the ground without its means of locomotion, and then the insect is crushed with a stomp. It breaks into several small, crunchy black pieces. While a blue-eyed, brown-haired man comments about cleaning up the place, a spider appears, not letting him finish the sentence. He kills it and finishes his words, saying cleaning all that up would be a pain. He ends by dropping his opponent's body to the ground, breaking it into several pieces. The other spiders watch all that enraged and with a spirit of vengeance. They quickly try to attack him to avenge their partner's death. but one of them is quickly stopped. He makes a very angry face at the others. Being attacked by all of them, the man is saved by a woman with a beautiful thin sword. Everyone looks at her impressed, facing the infernal spiders. She also has blue eyes and short red hair. She takes her sword and prepares for battle. Her strikes are extremely fast and precise. She uses all of her skills at that moment. After finishing everything, she asks the man why he did that and is answered that she was taking too long to kill the spiders. She says everyone really needs to fight with full force there while the soldiers are very scared due to the spiders. She then asks the whole team to prepare immediately and to pay close attention because they are normal humans. Orders all the dungeon children to attack. Kim quickly prepares after defeating one of the opponents. Again, kills some of them with a few blows. Everyone is impressed watching that mastery. The chief wonders if he is level 7, while he quickly finishes off all the other monsters. Lee orders after all that to take care of the wounded and let those who are well capture the spiders. Others comment that it was a good warm-up because they were thinking they would die of boredom doing nothing for a week. The commander thinks of something very strange. The records were saying that the spiders only appear at low levels, and it was false information, so she only believes in the time of the war records. She is questioned because the arachnids were weak and there's no need to worry about that now. They wonder if the lower level monsters are weak or maybe they are very strong. One of the soldiers thanks God they didn't use explosives. Meanwhile, after an analysis, it is realized that those were not infernal spiders, because the original infernal arachnids are much larger, possessing a strong exoskeleton and epidermis. They wonder if those were subspecies because their fighting style was different without close combat. The leader quickly looks for Kim, who asks her to wait and thinks that spiders are very careful creatures. Two soldiers wonder why there are so many webs present. The protagonist also reasons that these arachnids don't attack first. The workers continue to wonder if those are just webs because they are very thick. Kim keeps thinking because spiders wait for their prey to fall into the trap. One of the soldiers spots something and tries to warn the others. That would be the place where they entered. It seemed there was a bloodthirsty spider there. The protagonist asks if they still have explosives and is answered affirmatively. He says it would be good to install the bombs at the blocked entrance as soon as possible. Two explorers discuss why they need to do that since the battle is over, and it all seems very cliché. The blonde says that the strongest of the group is hiding and suddenly appears, which is affirmed by Kim. Kim soon says that the infernal spider is hiding nearby. Everyone looks at him with confusion and concern. They then underestimate the problem because it seems very small. Kim quickly reminds them of the warning given that those monsters were not the real infernal spiders. The leader asks how he is so sure. A scream of "How dare a mere insect cause a wound" is heard. It was the short-haired girl threatening a spider. Desperate, the protagonist shouts for her to get away. That was a real infernal arachnid. But there's no time because she is fatally struck and dies very tragically. With a lot of blood coming out of her mouth, the spider quickly tries to eat her body. The real infernal spiders appear in the place. All of them very fearless and angry. There are many of them on all sides. The leader quickly orders the explorers to stop what they are doing and regroup. She calls for Jinwoo because he was the one who said those are the real spiders. He stands still and does not respond to that name, and watches one of the soldiers get killed, begging for help and saying he didn't want to die. The leader shouts in his ear again, asking if he is okay. Paralyzed and sweating cold, he looks at her, and then apologizes to her. It is revealed that there are 2 baby infernal spiders and a queen, because the rest are of an inferior species, and it is quickly ordered that all explosives be used. They don't have time to worry about the cave structure because the webs are very strong. Lee asks if he has seen infernal spiders before, because they have great experience dealing with them. One of the spiders stares at them with great anger. The blonde boy says that the damn things don't stop appearing and wonders where the vanguard team of dungeon children is. He is soon answered by the brown-haired one that the spiders captured them to serve as snacks, and the rest must already be in heaven. He asks how much time is left for the bombs to activate, which will be activated soon. Everyone wonders why they will retreat and are told it's because of the spider expert's order. The main objective of this mission was just to run as soon as they reached the goal. The person who was eaten earlier was very careless. The most experienced orders the rest to dodge because the infernal spiders will advance. One of the soldiers says that's why he was waiting, and soon jumps towards one of the spiders. He is called an idiot and crazy because it seemed he wanted to die. He tries to hit the monster with a very strong punch. He even manages to touch the spider's face, but his blow is very inefficient. Realizing that, he becomes desperate. He also realizes that the shell is extremely hard. Everyone watches that scene very worried. There are even no words to describe it all. They soon see that another spider is coming to attack them. Quickly, the protagonist heroically stands in front of the monster about to attack. The pest becomes enraged with that audacity. Worried and tense, 2 explorers watch Kim take action. He approaches the spider and prepares to strike it, and soon after lands an extremely strong blow that even knocks down those nearby. A blue-eyed boy wonders if the fighter is a monster. The yellow-haired man tries to call the blue-eyed man further away from the dangerous combat. Meanwhile, the protagonist finishes off one of the monsters in front of everyone. Watching his movements closely, He prepares to kill it with an extremely accurate blow. He stands still, preparing for a few seconds, and also stares at the spiders for some time. There would be two at once that he would have to defeat. He thinks he has to hold on until the explosives are ready, and that he will die if he takes it lightly. Meanwhile, he wonders how long it has been since he used his electricity ability. Immediately, he emits an extremely white brightness with lightning behind, and decides to attack the spiders with electricity all around him. Everyone watches in astonishment, unable to believe it. Soon, the state of the planet bombs is checked. They are ready and will be detonated right now. Amidst many lightning bolts and smoke, Jinwoo faces everything. He is quickly informed that an exit has been opened and they need to escape immediately, not forgetting the supplies. He hits his boss, throwing her far away. After that, he goes to face more spiders. He grips the sword in his hands very tightly. He kicks the wall, breaking it into several pieces while everyone watches in awe. Amazed, impressed, and worried, the explorers observe. The leader tries to warn the protagonist that the spiders won't give up easily. She is countered with an order to go ahead first. The hero says he will see them outside. Still very tense, they sit and watch. The protagonist stands still with his scythe in hand. He says the spiders are laughing at him and are very arrogant. They think they have already won, but in his opinion, they had only gotten rid of a few mere nuisances. Kim says they don't understand the gravity of the situation and will have a lot of fun, in an ironic and sarcastic tone. A portal is quickly summoned by him, and soon after it opens very fast. He crosses the portal, revealing the labyrinth with all the Nava soldiers. Kim quickly gives instructions, saying that one of the terrifying infernal spiders would be his responsibility. The two warriors would take care of the others while the soldiers would guard the gate and the archers would provide cover during the difficult battle that was about to happen. But the only problem was that huge spider with extremely sharp teeth and 6 enormous scary red eyes. Dominic says that the creature didn't seem to have any intention of moving, while his master mentions that the second floor is too small and narrow for it to attack. The cave would simply collapse and bury the monster if it wasn't careful, and because of that, the only thing it could do was watch the battle. Then Kim orders that the smaller creatures should be fought and defeated first. All the spiders were charging with no mercy, so the master tells his servant to stay behind the gate. No one knew to worry because the opponents wouldn't be stronger than some horned rats, and none of them would survive that great battle. All the enemies had to be annihilated immediately. The great and powerful chief didn't hesitate to rush and face all those spiders with his huge, sharp, and pointed sword. Many enemies there were also ready to attack him without any mercy. That great master was very alert to all of his opponents, making sure no attack would surprise him in that battle. With his enormous sharp weapon, he delivered a very strong and precise blow to one of the enemies, which disintegrated due to the intensity of the stab. His strong green servant prepared his arrow to also attack the infernal spiders immediately. He pulled the bow with all the strength he had carefully, and released the arrow, which flew with immense speed. A lot of dust was seen, and the spiders became enraged after that archer's action. And quickly, one of them charged toward him with the intention of killing him with no mercy. But suddenly, one of its legs was grabbed with great force. The guardian had caught it in mid-air by one of its legs, and threw it to the ground with all the strength he had, making a loud noise and raising a lot of dust. The fight between the guardians and the spider was frantic and fiercely contested. The master watched all of that carefully, a little distant from the epicenter of the war. And soon he thought that everything was going better than he expected, as it seemed like the archers were using cannons and not just bows and arrows. Along with them, the soldiers were doing an excellent job protecting them from behind. The chief then, after observing everything, asked his servant why she wasn't trying harder to help, instead of just giving moral support to the fight. That was the moment for him to show off a bit in that huge battle, and he teased his opponent a lot, who was staring at him with a bloodthirsty gaze. But just as he was about to jump into action, he was urgently called by Dominic. She warned him that the queen, all the spiders had begun to move at that very moment. The mega arachnid charged at Kim, who flew amidst the dust raised by it. He fell to the ground with a desperate expression, his gaze attentive and frightened. The giant spider with 6 red eyes and extremely sharp teeth stared at him, roaring with great anger in an attempt to intimidate him. The massive roar was deafening, and even the protagonist had to cover his ears. It was all very strange, and suddenly a panel appeared, saying that the combat power had exceeded the limit and a status had been cancelled at that very moment. He became very concerned about the Nagas after receiving that surprising information. He was so tense that his eyes widened and he began to sweat coldly. Suddenly, more information appeared, stating that his soldier had died, but the archers and the assistant had successfully resisted the effects, and also that a Naga warrior had received an extremely fatal blow. After hearing all of that, the chief became furious and immediately prepared for combat, lightning emanating from him and his eyes glowing brightly. He charged with full determination toward the leader spider with the intention of wiping it out. He struck such a strong blow to its face that it emitted an immense light, making it scream in great pain and agony. The giant spider collapsed to the ground unconscious, raising a lot of dust at the sight of the fight. The master then quickly called for Dominic desperately. She screamed in panic, warning him that the gate was in complete danger because there were many small spiders there. Kim told her to wait, but he was soon interrupted in the middle of his sentence. He had been surprised once again by the queen spider, who threw him far from the battlefield. He landed on his feet, firmly gripping his sharp weapon, and immediately, he did not hesitate to counterattack his opponent without mercy. He cursed her with a rather nasty name as he prepared to strike her. The spider had turned to block the gate, and her entire focus was on Kim at that moment. Dominic quickly realized that ignoring her and heading straight for the gate would be dangerous, especially if she started running uncontrollably. The cute little guardian made a gesture with his hands, forming an upside-down triangle inside a circle. Kim observed everything calmly and attentively before attacking, holding his giant sword firmly. Suddenly, he was attacked, but he defended himself with his enormous sharp and pointed weapon. After that, he stared at his opponent with blood in his eyes, with energy radiating from him as he was already furious with the battle, and charged at her. He prepared even more to strike, gripping his weapon firmly in his hands while the spider watched him. After delivering a precise blow, he ended up gouging out one of her eyes, making her scream in despair and agony. Another extremely powerful strike was aimed at her mouth, which was already severely weakened. The protagonist also prepared to punch his enemy in the face with all his strength. His hands were radiating energy and lightning. Once again, the blow was accurate, right on the infernal spider's jaw, making her groan in immense pain, agony, and desperation. That punch revealed something inside her mouth, which was the reason she was stronger than Kim remembered. He pulled that object out of the spider's jaw as it was something incredibly cool and shiny. And then he finished off that perfect battle with a huge kick, sending her flying far away. She landed near the enormous queen spider, who became enraged, watching all the dust that had risen from the ground after her friend's fall. Quickly, Kim charged at her with blood in his eyes, intending to eliminate her. He prepared to throw the amulet he had taken from the other spider's mouth. With a focused and very intense gaze, a stone flew at incredible speed toward the gate where the servants were watching the entire battle. It quickly passed by Dominic, who was shocked, her face full of tension and concern. Behind her, an impressive white light appeared, accompanied by a message saying that a high-quality earth gem had been offered. Immediately, the master shouted for a Naga mage to be summoned at that location, and he ordered him to defeat the spider immediately. Thus, the small mystery of Geyser had been activated. An impressive rare-rank Naga mage had been summoned at that moment for the frantic battle. He had a very different and beautiful appearance. He raised his left hand, causing a massive amount of energy to be released instantly. A spell quickly surrounded the giant queen spider, but nothing had happened so far. Kim watched everything, sweating coldly, his face full of worry and tension. He then thought that the smaller opponents had already been annihilated at that point. An infernal spider roared with the intent to intimidate a Naga soldier as the two faced off. The soldier defended himself from one of her strikes, but the infernal arachnids were perfectly fine, and the focus of all that magic should have been the area of effect. The spider stared at the Naga soldier with blood in her eyes, ready to kill him. He watched her attempting to strike him, his face filled with despair and concern. Her strike was about to land, but another Naga soldier arrived to defend his comrade. He roared loudly to intimidate the infernal arachnid. Meanwhile, the great mage was assisting them in defeating their opponent with his powerful and impressive magic. Soon, the leader was informed that the warriors had managed to defeat all the infernal spiders, but something still remained to be done. The unresolved mystery was how to defeat the giant queen arachnid, who was furious after witnessing the death of all her servants. Her most obvious weak points were her eyes, mouth, and the joints of her legs, but the huge problem was her monstrous size. It would be impossible for Kim to reach her brain by randomly attacking her eyes, and entering her mouth would not be a feasible option. The labyrinth leader stared at his opponent for a few seconds, thinking about what he would do at that moment to defeat her, his expression fearless. Dominic quickly tried to warn him that the area around them had already been severely damaged, and that he needed to be careful, to which he responded affirmatively. Kim told her to prepare the Naga because they were going to attack the ceiling and open a path to the first floor. He was immediately told that this would be very dangerous, and that he wouldn't have enough strength to kill that giant plague. That would be the only option they had at that moment. After jumping to a higher spot, he realized the spider was following him, and he concluded that he had to make her pay for all the trouble she caused, and that she should feel honored because she would be the first. The Guardians commented on how their leader had a plan to bury the opponent alive. But the real plan was to dig a path upward, because burying something so enormous would be impossible. The master was fighting desperately, but Dominic couldn't do anything about it, not even help. Even the Naga, who was supposed to fight to protect him, couldn't do much other than watch, and the presence of those warriors seemed unnecessary. Dominic couldn't understand her master's intentions, even though she was his assistant and loyal shield bearer. A flashback ran through her mind of her leader saying he didn't have enough strength. She stood there, deep in thought about it, and said that there was no reason to be so sad because the reason they weren't fighting wasn't as simple as being useless. The master always went ahead of his servants to face danger head-on, and he cared about the safety of his employees in battle. He was heroic and grand because to avoid sacrificing any Naga, he had taken the initiative and was the only one who could do that. They were not mere spectators and had a mission, which was to stay there. If they believed in their leader and waited patiently, they would be rewarded. After delivering this beautiful speech, Dominic asked the mage how much mana he still had at that moment. Meanwhile, the battle between Kim and the spider was intense and fiercely contested. He then realized that guiding that monster wasn't so difficult, and if it weren't for those walls, it would definitely be much easier. The other explorers heard the loud sounds of the battle happening not far from them. They then noticed that the tremors were getting closer and said that there shouldn't be any invader-class monsters on the upper floors. They were about to leave because something seemed wrong, but suddenly, something appeared. There was a huge crack in the cave floor, and out of nowhere, an explosion emerged from the fissure, raising a lot of dust and leaving the explorers extremely frightened. A passage between the floors had been opened. Therefore, the state of the first and second floors would change, but the protagonist didn't have time to be informed of those warnings, so he ordered them to disappear immediately. Kim celebrated because he was lucky the first floor was a large cavern, as he was worried about emerging on the surface, while the explorers ran away in fear. Now the problem was how to throw the queen spider down because she was enraged and fully intent on killing him without mercy at that moment. Then the mage received an order to act immediately, and he quickly began to take action with full effort and dedication. Kim watched the mage's mastery with all his magic and power, his face full of worry about the situation, and he thought about the attack from below that the mage was delivering to the giant spider. But it wasn't just a lower strike, it was a magical ice prison. Dominic was impressed by all of this and said that the spider must have been confused at that moment because she was expecting a different type of attack from the mage. That layer of ice wouldn't withstand the spider's weight, so it would naturally break, causing her to fall into the abyss. The beautiful and intelligent servant then imagined her master praising her and calling her amazing. But soon she thought that the opponent wouldn't die from falling from that height, as it would be insufficient. So she reasoned that her leader didn't need techniques or traps, because what really made sense was brute and pure strength. He would need an opportunity for one powerful attack, which wasn't possible due to the circumstances and the location where he was at the moment. The ice finally broke, sending the enormous and terrifying queen spider tumbling into the ravine as Dominic watched everything with great attention and concern. And soon she encouraged all the warriors not to let the giant arachnid escape from that place. The battle continued at a frenetic pace, with everyone helping to defeat that terrifying giant opponent. The enemy needed to be held down, as that would make it easier for the leader to finish them off, killing them mercilessly. Kim then focused so intensely that purple light began to shine, aiming to complete the mission successfully without any mistakes. A huge smoke cloud rose from the ice, a result of the powers of the great and admirable labyrinth leader with his impressive abilities. The spider watched everything in fear, her red eyes exuding terror, her expression deeply worried. And suddenly, from that smoke, the leader emerged, ready to strike her with his large, sharp knife directly in her ugly face. Finally, the panel appeared, declaring and confirming the grand victory of Kim, concluding the difficult battle. He had significantly increased his charisma after completely crushing his enemies and advanced from initial commander to regular commander, increasing his power. The rank units gained experience and would level up. Kim and Dominic, after receiving this information, were surprised, their faces filled with excitement and happiness. The shape of the labyrinth's guardians had also changed because they had leveled up, but the arm that one of them had lost was not regenerating. Both wondered why the mage wasn't transforming, as he needed to level up on his own after a lab was built. Research facilities and forges could be created once the labyrinth reached level 4. Kim needed 50 gems to upgrade the labyrinth, but at that moment he only had 2. He then said he would check the treasure immediately. Many high-quality gems would be there as rewards for overcoming the battles. Even though the soldier had died, the labyrinth leader had gained quite a bit in return. He quickly offered 2 intermediate quality gems to the altar, starting the labyrinth's upgrade immediately. The master would take back some small stones with him, as it would be strange to return empty-handed. The fight was over, but the Nagas still had many duties to perform. A great battle had taken place, so beasts and explorers would soon flood the city of vicinity. The bodies of the infernal spiders needed to be collected, and all passages had to be blocked with magic immediately. Kim then asked his employees if they could handle such a task. Right after, he questioned Dominic about why the mage seemed so downcast, and she replied that he was completely out of mana. The rest of the Nagas had to cover the gate with stones immediately. Kim would leave now since the path to the first floor was clear, and he would return in time for the upgrade to be completed. Spending 5 days there would be wise, considering how much food they had in stock. The master then looked at Dominic with a proud expression, and gave her a slight smile. He then complimented her for doing a great job, even with a half-baked plan and improvisation. The other Nagas should think of a reward because their leader was going to reward them for their effort in completing the mission successfully. Kim soon bid farewell to his employees and revealed that they would see each other again in 5 days, and he set off at full speed toward the outside of the labyrinth. 5 days later, at the Pajubi expedition team's tent, the explorers were astonished to see Kim. All the expedition members returned to the base while the labyrinth leader enjoyed a nice bowl of soup and commented that they had taken the right amount of time. Kim had only taken 5 days to finish his task, which was quite fast, but the brown-haired girl wasn't happy about it. The labyrinth leader stared at her with a confused expression and asked if they wanted some soup and if, by chance, they were hungry. The brown-haired girl was shocked by him, her face filled with disappointment and despair. She then sat at the table with her friend and asked what had happened, to which he replied that he had been lucky and managed to escape that place. Rumors said it was nearly impossible to escape, and if that were true, Kim was indeed very lucky. The brown-haired girl asked if he had always been so cheeky, and then asked what he would want as a reward since she owed him her life, to which he replied that she owed him nothing because he was born and raised in Geyser. They were living on borrowed time, and after learning this, she angrily insisted that she did owe the labyrinth leader a favor. After much insistence, he decided that he did want something in return, which was simply for her to wash the bowl that held the soup. After collecting all the spider treasures for himself, he bid farewell, saying they were even, and that he wanted nothing more than to rest comfortably at home. The girl was eager to know more about the deeper floors, but he lied, saying he knew nothing, and thought that the failure of the expedition had cost them far too much. At the labyrinth's precious gemstone jeweler, the gems from the 12th floor were offered to the owner. The labyrinth leader then lied about the 12 giant stones, claiming they were obtained unjustly and should remain a secret. The jeweler quickly assessed the situation and offered 400 million won for all those treasures. From Kim's expression, the old man mistakenly thought he had offered too little. The boy then asked Mr. Bake to find him a house in an isolated place, which left the old man feeling quite offended. Feeling insulted, Kim threatened to look for another dealer, which quickly got him what he wanted. He then asked Beck to call someone and pretend that the place was his workplace. On the phone, the man seemed very stressed about the whole situation. Mr. Bake tried to downplay the situation and the man's stress, but wasn't very successful. Kim then left, stating that it was the easiest way for him to enter Geyser. Meanwhile, the person on the phone remained very stressed. Mr. Bake then commented that it wasn't as if the man could crush his head. Meanwhile, back in the Master's labyrinth, Dominic noticed an extremely bright white light and was startled by it. All of that was simply because Kim was arriving at the location for the impressive portal and was immediately greeted by his servant. He quickly thought that he couldn't lock his room and open the passage every single day, and that living alone was the best option at the moment. He imagined his father scolding him and saying all sorts of bad things because his son had disappeared for 20 days straight. To avoid that annoyance, he preferred solitude. Dominic, very concerned, asked if her master was okay and if he had gotten hurt, but he was just exhausted from being so busy during those days. The chief quickly asked if the labyrinth's upgrade had been completed, as no changes were visible, but it had been finished quite some time ago. Even the core seemed intact, but no new structures had been built. Only more units had appeared. The exterior would only change at level 5, and since the master had saved a bunch of gems, you should be able to improve things gradually. Then his servant revealed that there was a visitor waiting for him, leaving him surprised and filled with doubt. The visitors were waiting for him on the road. It was a team that visited all the underground labyrinths of Geyser. The visitor was surprised to see the new owner of the labyrinth. He immediately greeted the king of the great country. He was very eager to work with the labyrinth leader, and his real name was Black Merchant. Kim understood all the information. He then remarked that Mr. Bake was very unlucky, leaving the visitors quite confused. Kim then asked the Black Merchant how he had found the place, but the merchant had known about it for a long time. News about the brave labyrinth leader who led the valiant Nagas and imprisoned the infernal spiders had already spread everywhere. Dominic, after hearing these words, thought that the ugly little creature was just lying. She figured the black market seller was watching nearly everything that happened in Geyser and seemed to be leading that area. Even though her master came across as strange and meticulous, he couldn't be underestimated by that little creature. The merchant complimented the assistant's efficiency. He was then asked about the matters to be discussed. He said the black merchants intended to establish a friendly relationship with the new labyrinth owner and support it. In other words, he was there to make some sales. Kim then asked his assistant if they could kick that little guy out, but she responded negatively. Dominic explained that if the labyrinth leader's relationship with the visitor soured, he would spread information about the location throughout Geyser. And since they had already been noticed by them, they needed to play their game, even if it would be a nuisance. However, if Kim used them to his advantage, it could be highly beneficial for both sides, so he decided to buy a few things from the merchant. Dominic's last piece of advice was very important. She recommended that, if possible, he should buy the first item the merchant offered and recommended. Returning to where the little guy was, Kim quickly asked him to show all the items and tools he had for sale. He was soon asked what he wanted, and he immediately replied that he would buy his friend's recommendation. Luckily, the merchant had his greatest achievement for sale, an extremely rare item to come by. Only a few of those remained in Geyser, and they were called parasites. The price was a high-level earth gem, and the merchant was even embarrassed to mention such a high price. Kim asked to take a closer look at the bottle, which contained a kind of worm inside. He widened his eyes to observe and analyze that purple thing. Dominic seemed quite pleased with it. Kim quickly offered payment for the merchant to assess it. The price was just 5 stones, and the labyrinth leader happened to have exactly that amount. The purchase was successfully made by the chief. He then discovered that it was a tradition for merchants to present their most precious artifact first. Dominic explained that the object had no function as long as it was kept in the bottle, unless it was placed in the owner's body. Without hesitation, the labyrinth leader opened the bottle. He poured all the parasites onto his body as nothing bad would happen according to his efficient servant's advice. The creatures quickly began to burrow into his skin, and he watched as it happened. He felt himself slowly distancing from his humanity, but this sensation wasn't entirely new to him. A panel soon appeared, indicating that the parasite had invaded his body and synchronization would be completed immediately. Kim then set aside the parasite and the merchant, shifting his focus to the labyrinth upgrades, which had often been delayed by him. He needed the help of his loyal assistant at that moment, and she was eager to assist him. Panels appeared displaying many good news about the labyrinth. Kim hadn't checked the statistics tab in quite some time and discovered that the levels had improved significantly. He felt like he had rushed the upgrade a bit, but Dominic responded. She said it was common to build interior facilities or military strength first and then upgrade gradually, but there was a catch. Kim possessed immense power and was able to grow quickly because he didn't need to expend energy summoning an army. The other labyrinth owners weren't weak. They just didn't want to leave their labyrinths. Kim could focus on the interior right away and quickly asked for the construction list. A cattle farm was available where he could cultivate food for the hardworking Nagas in the labyrinth. He also had access to a training center where a senior Naga could train the military forces. A tavern was also available where he could gather information from neutral creatures visiting the labyrinth, and they might even form alliances. A smithy, laboratory, and temple were also available for construction, each essential to maximize physical, magical, and healing abilities, helping the labyrinth thrive. Kim, deep in thought, asked the panel to show the labyrinth map. He immediately ordered Dominic to send the archers and warriors to scout, as this was all part of his plan. The labyrinth master ordered the construction of a cattle farm and a tavern near the Naga nest. A laboratory, smithy, and temple would consume a lot of energy, so he would need to summon a military force first. After reasoning this out, he asked his loyal and adorable servant to gather all the low-level gems, as they would be sacrificed to the altar. 30 well-maintained yet low-quality earth amulets were used for the labyrinth. Kim was about to summon a Naga, but changed his mind at the last moment. Instead, he decided to summon an entire army. A week later, the constructions were completed, and the animal captures had been concluded as well. The unemployed workers were tasked with digging corridors and creating traps, and they were getting plenty of rest. The military forces alternated between guard patrols and training, and the new map creation would be completed soon. Kim was very happy with all this information provided by Dominic, but there was a catch. It was difficult to keep up with the gem expenses, and for that reason, the Spider Duke was constantly starting wars. They would have to descend to collect Earth gems, but Dominic quickly asked if her master was okay at that moment. She pointed out that he had spent a lot of time in the labyrinth and that his family might be missing him. Kim reassured her that everything was fine because he had moved out 4 days ago and now lived alone on a mountain ridge. There were no convenience stores or houses nearby, and if the opportunity arose, he might even take her to see the surface. Dominic became very excited and enthusiastic about that. The portal was about to close, and Kim didn't think he would stay there for 24 hours straight. He bid Dominic farewell, telling her that he was going to rest and that she should get plenty of rest as well. Kim didn't even have time to eat and would have to bring a generator to the labyrinth just to make instant noodles. Out of nowhere, the green panel appeared, stating that the parasite had successfully absorbed into the host body for synchronization, and that it would attempt to take control. Kim was very shocked by this information, his face filled with fear and concern. His eyes widened and began to turn completely black. He screamed in pain and agony, not understanding what was happening, cursing repeatedly. He yelled that his eye was burning and stinging horribly. His face began to transform, taking on a very demonic appearance, with his eyes and skin becoming disfigured and red. He let out a scream so loud it could be heard from outside the house. A woman approached the building, located in the middle of nowhere. She wondered if this was the right place, as it was practically the end of the world. Suddenly, she heard the terrified screams of the homeowner. Without hesitation, she opened the door and asked if Jimuse was okay. She was met with the sight of him kneeling on the floor, groaning with his hands covering his face. His face looked drastically different from before, terrifying. After this catastrophic encounter, she asked if he had calmed down, to which he nodded affirmatively. Kim apologized for being seen in such a horrifying state, and she asked what all of that was. She remarked that half of his face seemed to be melting, and he replied that it was nothing serious. Kim lied, saying it was just an eye disease he had developed while living in the dungeon, to which she responded that she had never seen such a thing before. Not even the dungeon children from the lower floors had that, and she asked if they were from the 12th floor. Why would he have acquired such a disease so deep in the Duke of Spider's territory? She insisted that this was impossible because the dungeon children on the 12th floor were either dead or missing. Kim then questioned why he was considered dead or alive when he was standing there now, leaving the girl both shocked and surprised. She asked if that was why he knew the infernal spiders so well, and he thought to himself that at least now she knew everything and seemed to be trustworthy. Kim quickly spoke rudely, asking why she had made such an unannounced visit, and if Mr. Baek had told her where he lived. She responded that she was just thinking of inviting him on the next exploration mission. She could even pay him extra to have him as part of her team and, in that way, pay off her debt. But she thought that Kim might not be interested since he was strong and had been acting alone for a long time. He accepted, saying he wasn't alone because he had been on the surface for a few days, but was thinking of returning to the lower floors. Kim mentioned that Geyser had changed a lot since his last visit, and he would join the team, making the brown-haired girl very happy and excited. A child of the dungeon from the 12th floor would be on her team, but only until she adapted to everything. The girl was about to return and adjust her plans as she hadn't anticipated this, and Kim walked her to the door of his home. The exploration would take place in a few days, and they would spend 2 weeks on the 6th floor, including the entire team. 5 dungeon children, 10 regular explorers, and 2 of them were not strangers since they had been in the last mess. Kim questioned how the team that only knew how to run on the 2nd floor now wanted to go to the 6th, but she replied that they weren't unqualified, they were just in terrible condition. The girl also said that with a bit more effort, they could reach the 8th pit, and the master understood because the monsters were strong too. She said goodbye, mentioning that the equipment was already being prepared and that they would see each other again in 4 days with the details sent via messages. She had a lot to prepare and had to leave quickly, so Kim told her to be very careful. He reminded her to let him know before visiting again or else he would report her for trespassing. She agreed, saying she wouldn't forget that message. Kim thought that it hadn't been long since he had moved, and it would be a problem if the portal was left open. 4 days later, near the Pajubi portal, they discussed how the entrance was small, as gates A, B, and C were used for large-scale explorations. Therefore, gates D, E, and F were available for anyone, as long as they showed identification and the number of participants. The girl also informed the master that a new path had opened on the 2nd floor through portal B, making it more chaotic due to the number of monsters. Someone interrupted their conversation by saying "damn" amidst all the discussion. The man asked if this was Kim Jinwoo, the person who had saved Junyoung. The two exchanged greetings and many compliments. Other explorers exchanged jabs and accusations, trying to embarrass each other. They soon stopped, telling Kim that it was good to fight together again and that they would give their best. The girl interrupted, ending the chat, and told Youngo to take care of the regular explorers. She also said she looked forward to working with Chansik Sai again, and he replied affirmatively, saying he would do his job. Kim was surprised because he had thought the girl was the commander, but he soon understood everything. Meanwhile, at the Naga bar in the dungeon, Dominic appeared quite drunk, lying near a barrel and drooling a lot. She quickly asked for another cold beer. The cute Megas commented on how she always got very depressed and acted this way whenever the master disappeared from the labyrinth. At least now there was a bar, but before, she had gone mad. Once, Dominic even wanted to cut off a Naga's tail to make a snack, saying it would grow back after a while, which had terrified the little Naga. They also gossiped that rumors said she had a secret room where she kept everything that reminded her of the master. Suddenly, Dominic joined the conversation, questioning the cute little creatures about what they were talking about. She said that all of that wasn't such a bad idea. Meanwhile, during the exploration, Kim, as he received orders to sneak past monsters, thought that this team was different from the one in the previous mission. As he received instructions, he also reflected on how they had known each other for some time and were efficient and systematic, especially Joan Chansik, who was the one giving those instructions. Kim and the brown-haired girl were impressed with the commander's abilities, even though he was of a low level. The detection ability could bring victories in battles as it allowed them to sense the living creatures around them, except for those with camouflage or stealth abilities. The girl thought that Kim had this power, but he only sensed his adversaries. She remarked that the sixth sense of a dungeon child from the 12th floor was on a different level, and someone seemed to overhear that. The soldiers commented on the impressive information they had heard. Kim had already told her that he hated it when things got complicated, and she apologized. A soldier mentioned that the captain had ordered all the dungeon children to gather. Those present were impressed by what they saw in front of them. The commander said that this was the entrance to an abandoned dungeon. Wolf monkeys had taken over the normal path, and they would have to detour through there. He didn't sense anything with his abilities, so there probably wouldn't be any dangers, but he wanted everyone's opinion. Kim asked if they would be okay and not get lost, and the reply was affirmative since the captain had memorized the entire route. He didn't object and thought it could be a good reference for his own labyrinth. The leader decided and ordered everyone to go to the center of the dungeon, to the boss's room. Kim remembered his natives and became worried. Meanwhile, Dominic was instructing the cute creatures to dig into the wall to hide something. In an unknown place, a monster and a person discussed Draken's condition, the descendant of a dragon, and the creature asked about taking the detour. The man replied that it was possible for the master and the ancient dragons to travel, but there was a catch. The monster said there was no need to fear since everyone in Geyser knew they were slow. He questioned the man again about taking the detour, and was told it would take 3 days, but with him, it would take 2 weeks. Then the large monster also said that Draken was useless and that the man would do all the work. That man was the imposter Rikshasha. Meanwhile, the explorers reached the boss's room. Kim remarked that only a few hours had passed since they entered the labyrinth and there were no beasts or traps. The leader explained that this was a labyrinth abandoned after the Great War, which was why it was empty and also why the map didn't detect any threats. He added that the military planned to turn the third floor into a base, and Kim asked if a map existed. The leader responded that the equipment was sold at the Labyrinth shopping mall. He also said that only the upper floors were mapped, but the military had maps up to the intermediate levels, making Kim think about getting some for synchronization. The leader then ordered Hoojin and Youngmo to take some explorers and set up a motion sensor at the entrance, while the rest would set up camp. The faster they finished, the more time they would have to rest, and after hearing all this, Kim felt frustrated because no task had been assigned to him. The brown-haired girl told Kim that he needed to conserve his energy since he was the strongest on the team, and everyone would treat him more gently because of that. She advised him to take a look in the owner's room as there was something there. It was the throne of the Duke of that labyrinth, where the monsters were treated like kings. After hearing this, Kim thought to himself that he couldn't say he was used to it. Suddenly, the panel appeared, informing him that the parasite's detection ability was being activated. Out of nowhere, his eye began turning red again, just like it had in his isolated, humble home. He placed his hand over his face, causing the brown-haired girl to become very worried. She asked if he was okay, and if it was that disease again, and Kim responded that it was, but it wasn't as bad as the night before. The master asked her to make sure no one approached, as they might be surprised, and she agreed. After she stepped away, he realized that she couldn't see the green information panel in the air. His body didn't hurt, and he felt calm ever since the parasite's control took over. His vision was slightly more unusual than normal. There was something on the altar that he couldn't see with the naked eye. He moved closer and began rummaging through some stones. It was his detection sense in action. What he found didn't seem like a gem, but he picked it up, and the object shone with a bright red light. Suddenly, the panel reappeared, informing him that he had found an old but still useful fragment of the labyrinth. He understood why it seemed important, but had hoped it was a real earth gem. The panel then stated that the parasite was further expanding its detection ability. This left Kim very confused, his eyes widening with doubt and bewilderment. He then realized that these were all the gems in that area. Meanwhile, back in his labyrinth, his assistant Dominic still appeared to be quite drunk, in the same state as before. The cute creatures stared at her with worried expressions. Suddenly, they were questioned by another mini Naga because they were supposed to be on watch. They were also asked about the equipment and whether anything had happened with Dominic. After receiving their response, the Naga seemed very surprised and appeared to be angry. He was confused because Dominic could have asked them to make 2 rooms, one for her and another for Kim. She was more human-like and had a higher status than the mini Nagas. The green Naga continued talking about how it was uncomfortable for Dominic to sleep in the nest, not realizing her presence behind him. She suddenly appeared, saying that the idea was excellent. Meanwhile, during the labyrinth exploration, the brown-haired girl remarked that it was strange for Kim to look tired yet be in such a good mood. She asked if he had any fetishes, but he replied that he barely slept the previous night while thinking about how most of the stones were small and of poor quality. He admitted that he felt bad because it was all worthless. The night before, he had collected a lot of gems, hidden them, and also ran around to mark and explore more of the map. He also thought that he would have to come back alone next time, all thanks to the parasite, and that he would make a wish if he could at that moment. Suddenly, the green information panel appeared, stating that the parasite had a deep interest in properly cooked human cuisine. The soldier explorers couldn't stay still. One of them informed the group that the team leader was ordering the dungeon children to gather, and after hearing this, Kim immediately thought of hiding and summoning. He reasoned that this was likely because of a beast. The expedition leader explained that there were 2 groups of monsters at the exit, and they would have to face them immediately to pass. Judging by the sounds, they seemed to be either blade bats or armored monkeys, and in the worst-case scenario, it could be wolf primates. Kim then questioned him about his ability, and the leader carefully explained what it could do and detect. The leader said there was no way to avoid the monsters, and a soldier questioned his method, but the alternative was far too dangerous. The 2 groups were too large, and other predators would be drawn in by the noise and the smell of blood, which could trap them there in the worst-case scenario. With no other alternatives, the explorers discussed their expectations and plans. The leader interrupted, saying it wasn't as simple as it seemed because there were 28 beasts on the 3rd floor, enough to battle for territory. The brown-haired girl mocked his statement, saying those monsters were just weak, fragile insects. At least that's how Jin Woo-sai would describe them. The leader looked at Kim with a very confused expression, not understanding anything. This left Kim feeling a bit awkward and self-conscious. The 2 conversed and decided to fight the monsters immediately since it would be better to get it over with. With all his strength and courage, Kim would handle half of the beasts there. The monsters, enraged and furious, roared loudly, attempting to intimidate. At that moment, the expedition leader revealed that the beasts had begun fighting each other fiercely, bravely, and mercilessly. He also mentioned that there were around 30 beasts, and it would be the day he would die. Kim, preparing himself, declared no chance. He jumped from the ground, leaving a massive trail of light and making a lot of noise. He fought frenetically, crushing and obliterating all the beasts without mercy. Watching all of this, the group leader thought it was impossible to defeat them with a single blow since lower floor dungeon children took minutes to kill these monsters. He considered how the tactics of the other soldiers were connected to the labyrinth, the floor level, and the environment. He also reasoned that attacking relentlessly until the opponent fell was the way most dungeon children fought. He noted, however, that there was something unique about this moment. Kim was landing strikes that killed instantly upon impact. He was only targeting vital points as if he could see them all with his eyes. Continuing his thoughts, he compared Kim to another soldier and was impressed by his unusually precise and fluid movements. Suddenly, the brown-haired girl interjected, saying that Jin Wusei came from the Marcus Labyrinth. The leader was stunned by this information, unable to believe what he had heard, as it was quite surprising. The girl explained that Kim had passed through several labyrinths to get there and had learned the most efficient way to fight for survival. Being from a deeper location, the leader responded, saying that now everything made sense. With the leader impressed by her lies, the girl thought that she still had to keep an eye on Marcus, even though he continued to suppress his powers, and she still had to come up with a fabricated story for Jin Wusei. Quickly, order was given to stop wasting time and get to work since Kim was taking care of everything. The leader said they needed to, at the very least, show some effort by fighting relentlessly. Kim thought his body felt extremely light, like a feather, and the enemy's movements seemed very slow. He didn't understand as it seemed like he was fighting with all he had at that moment. Confused, he wondered why, despite suppressing all his strength to match Jun Youngsee's level, it still felt like he was going all out. Suddenly, the panel appeared again, providing several crucial pieces of information about the parasite strengthening the host. Kim's eyes widened with a sharp expression upon learning this news. He wondered if the parasite was showing him the heart of the beast in front of him. The parasite revealed what the monster's ribs were protecting. The more Kim discovered about the parasite's abilities, the more amazing it seemed, and the price he had paid for it felt cheap so far. Except for the part where the parasite had tried to take control, he knew he needed to investigate more to fully utilize it. The panel stated that the parasite had already recognized Kim, and it would do incredible things like attempting to defend its host's life at any cost. Suddenly, Jin Wusei was called as part of the mission had been completed, and he responded by saying he had finished his part as well. Kim had said he would handle half the monsters but ended up taking care of 70%, which made the exploration more convenient. The brown-haired girl also reminded him to keep her in mind as she would have to make excuses for his impressive abilities. The explorers were already talking about Kim as a war hero, and he was on the verge of becoming a legend, but he modestly replied that he had exaggerated a bit. The girl quickly announced that the battle was over and ordered the warriors to gather the gems quickly before other monsters appeared. Junyoung was called by the leader and she complimented him, saying he had done a great job. However, he revealed another significant issue at that moment. He said that a much larger exploration team was nearby and that they were approaching, divided into groups to surround them. Kim hadn't been able to detect the approaching group earlier because he was distracted by the battle, but now it was clear that the enemies had been watching them the entire time. Everyone was immediately ordered to prepare for a fight and remain on guard. Kim questioned the girl's orders and she explained that beasts weren't the only enemies in Geyser. With no laws in place, it had become common for people to steal from others. She mentioned the 30 beasts and how tired the team was, while a much larger group was getting closer. If they didn't have Chance Xag with his impressive abilities, they would have been in serious trouble. Chance confirmed that the enemies were regrouping because they realized they'd been discovered. It seemed they had given up on the ambush, but were still closing in. The girl said they would remain on guard and act accordingly since the exploration team was too exhausted to run and would be caught before they could escape. She remarked that they seemed overly reliant on Jin Wusei. She asked if she could count on him if things went wrong, to which he responded affirmatively. He mentioned that he cared deeply for everyone there. Suddenly, someone arrived at the scene saying certain words that left the brown-haired girl with an expression of pure rage and hatred. She called Song Jongshul a bastard, and he responded with mocking sarcasm. He said he was happy to see the team again. He also mentioned that he'd heard about their defeat in the war against the spiders and taunted them further. The girl ordered them to leave, but he continued mocking her, saying they wanted to reach the lower floor. The two stared at each other for a brief moment. He then asked if the team had found anything good along their journey. This only made the girl angrier, her expression filled with hatred, and she gritted her teeth. Kim asked the leader who this rude man was, spewing insults and humiliations. The leader explained that they were Terrans from the government-backed exploration organization that controlled labyrinth access. Kim was shocked to learn that the state supported these guys, and the leader explained that it was hard to believe, but there was a huge influx of people registering with the association. At that time, more people were part of the organization than outside of it, and this was happening because there was so much money involved in Geyser's business. He also mentioned that these guys probably believed they had a noble cause, but in the end, it was just a fight for money. After hearing all this, Kim thought to himself that he didn't like the new enemy team, his face growing serious. The panel informed him that the parasite was assessing the power of the opponents and revealed several important details about them, including their levels. Around 40 explorers were present, all armed and clearly accustomed to the situation. Kim also realized that if they fought these guys, the entire team would be massacred, except for himself. He reflected on the situation unfolding around him. He was growing angrier and filled with hatred. The girl noticed that he was emanating a killing intent at that moment. It was similar to the king of the labyrinths, and her body froze. It was very dangerous. In her desperate thoughts, she wondered if the chief was targeting her. The red-haired man continued mocking the girl, taking pleasure in his cruel joke. She angrily replied that it wasn't because of his words that she had become like this. The group leader looked utterly disappointed and distressed. The red-haired man sneered at the entire situation, saying he had enjoyed it thoroughly. He remarked that they must have suffered a lot thanks to the monsters and thought they might need help, but that Appa still had a lot to do. He ordered his team to move on and not interfere with Junyoung's prey, but he still had something to say at that moment. He offered a few pieces of advice he hadn't had the chance to give earlier. He recommended that Kim not join Junyoung's team because they hadn't even managed to register their name with the government association. He then invited Kim to join his team instead, saying he seemed very useful and would be treated well. He ended by saying he was offering Kim a great opportunity, but Kim firmly replied that he wasn't interested. The red-haired man also said goodbye to Junyoung, adding that they would meet again soon, in the not-too-distant future. Junyoung was filled with anger, and the team leader told her to calm down, saying they were lucky they hadn't ended up in a battle right then and there. The leader of the team suggested that Jinwoo-sai remain calm because of everything that had just happened. Then he noticed that Kim didn't seem stressed during such a tense and angry moment. The girl and the leader asked him to stop pretending to be calm, but Kim didn't understand what they meant. Junyoung apologized to them for releasing a killing intent, explaining that she sometimes had a tendency to do that. The expedition leader was surprised since no one had felt anything, and if they had, the regular explorers would have probably fainted. Kim asked the girl if she knew the red-haired guy, and she responded that they had come from the same labyrinth. She explained that although he was like this now, he used to be normal and a good, though aggressive, leader. She knew he had tasted freedom and money after escaping but hadn't expected him to change so much. Everyone agreed to return after collecting the beasts as they were still in profit. Kim asked about the real objective, but the expedition with Song Jongshul to be a problem in the future. The girl commented that this time he had approached them, but next time the outcome would be uncertain, and with such a large team, all the beasts would be drawn to them. She added that under normal circumstances, she would have continued, but everyone had already profited enough by then. The soldiers had finished collecting the beasts and informed the team that the task was complete. Everyone was instructed to gather and return to the surface immediately. Kim commented that the journey back was smooth, and they returned within a week. He also mentioned that unfortunate events always seemed to happen when they set foot in Geyser. It felt strange that they were all still alive while others were shaken. The girl explained that it was probably because they had escaped before anything bad could happen. Kim said he should investigate more about the Song Jongshul Exploration Association. At the Labyrinth's gem appraisal shop, Kim and the old man discussed the leader of the organization. The old man explained that Song Jongshul was the most notable figure in the association, even though he understood why he would oppose the restrictions and direct control of the group. Thanks to the establishment of a minimum entry level, the survival rate of regular explorers had increased significantly, which surprised Kim. The dungeon children had no restrictions when bringing soldiers, which often resulted in annihilation, making their survival rate low. Opinions on the matter were divided, but the public supported the association. After hearing this, Kim reflected on events in some novels and comics. Kim asked if Song Jongshul had caused any trouble, but the old man didn't know. He suggested that if he had, it would have been done discreetly. Kim kept asking, but the old man said that getting information about Geyser wasn't easy, and it was usually just rumors without much basis. Then something came to his mind. The old man mentioned that there were groups called human hunters, which greatly surprised Kim. He also explained that the dungeon children would band together without explorers to attack other expeditions and steal their belongings. These hunters were crazy, wearing cloaks and having sharp teeth like a shark's, and some were from the abyss. He warned Kim to be careful. This information was useful, and the old man reassured Kim that he didn't need to worry too much. The old man then asked about the gems Kim had brought, but this time he didn't have any because the payment was in cash. Kim reflected on the fact that the public supported the association, but he wondered why Junyoung seemed to dislike them for some unknown reason. He couldn't find any problems, which irritated him, so he decided to avoid getting further involved. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, Dominic heard a noise and became very alert to what was happening. She saw the white portal open behind her, with a curious and surprised expression. She immediately asked her master why he had returned so soon, and he replied that the expedition had ended earlier than expected. She asked if everything was fine in the labyrinth, but her expression soon turned sad and pensive. The master mentioned that he had a guest waiting for him at the bar, which left him confused. Kim asked Dominic if it was the black merchant again, but she replied that it wasn't. It was actually a sub-elf mercenary. He was very confused by this presence, showing concern. He decided to go see for himself, but Dominic scolded him at that very moment. She informed him that sub-elves had no sense of loyalty or pride, and that it wouldn't be wise to hire one due to their lack of trustworthiness. Kim then responded, saying that given these circumstances, she should have already kicked the sub-elf out, but Dominic had a reason. Unfortunately, there wasn't anyone skilled enough on the labyrinth patrol, and not even the archers could handle it, as they were too large to be proper scouts. So she thought they needed a sub-elf, and Kim mentioned that sub-elves seemed far from being skilled, and that the production map was far behind schedule. He decided he would judge the situation for himself and told Dominic not to worry, as he was the one who should be making the decisions. Opening the tavern door, Kim was greeted by the guy who served drinks there. The two saluted each other with mutual respect. In the corner sat the sub-elf, silent and quiet, with a glass of alcohol close by. She quickly approached the labyrinth master, holding a weapon in her hand with a suspicious and doubtful intention. Kim and Dominic were startled, looking confused about what was happening. The master said that this must be the sub-elf they had been talking about earlier. They stared at each other for a moment without saying a word. Dominic pointed out how rude and disrespectful this was. She explained that a guest should show respect to the labyrinth's master, not disrespect him as she had. The sub-elf remained silent, her expression sad and regretful. Then she broke down, visibly upset, feeling guilty for her actions, her face showing remorse. With great respect, she spoke to Kim, explaining that she had lived in the darkness of his labyrinth without permission for some time. The visitor wished to introduce herself to the leader, and he granted her permission to do so immediately. Her name was Rikshasha, a sub-elf mercenary. Kim remarked that she seemed very confident in her speed. However, he wanted to know why she had approached him with a weapon in her hand. It seemed as though she was prepared to kill him if she couldn't rely on her speed. Dominic, very angry, asked how the sub-elf dared to do such a thing, calling it unacceptable. Kim shouted at Dominic to stop immediately. The sub-elf apologized, admitting she had doubted the competence of the king, and Kim quickly asked her to stop using fancy words because he hated that. They all stood in silence for a moment without saying a word. The sub-elf admitted she had never seen a human sitting on a labyrinth throne and simply wanted to confirm if he was competent enough. Kim had passed her test, and Rikshasha confessed she wouldn't have been able to hurt him in a direct fight. The leader asked the visitor a series of questions, and she explained her functions, patrolling, tracking, and gathering information. She was immediately hired, much to Dominic's concern and dismay. Kim asked her to calm down, reminding her that they needed a scout. The leader and the new hire left, continuing their conversation as he showed her around the labyrinth. Dominic remained visibly furious, while Rikshasha had a smug expression. The sub-elf thought the labyrinth master was disorganized. Everything seemed chaotic and messy, a sign of negligence. The labyrinth's core was too exposed, easily visible from the hallway, which was a sign of great weakness. She also noted that there were no traps at the entrance, and the place hardly felt like a labyrinth. Even the employees didn't show an ounce of seriousness. The sub-elf wondered what Kim was planning and if he really understood what it meant to be a labyrinth master. She spotted the cute creatures nearby, playing and having fun. Rikshasha commented that they weren't working when they should have been. She was surprised to learn that they were on break, with free time to enjoy. She questioned this approach, but Kim quickly responded, explaining that providing adequate meals and rest was far better than working them to the limit. Kim said that the more a muscle is used, the less effective it becomes. And once he was part of a mining crew, he was simply applying the perspective of a worker. The sub-elf thought her master's view was very naive. She reasoned that Kim was still human, even as a labyrinth master, and he wouldn't last long. Kim then called her to join him for a walk in the training room. She thought the place was insignificant, but decided to follow through with her plan, learning from Dominic that the mages were in training that day. A few days later, Kim expressed his frustration about the labyrinth's development being very slow and the excavations falling far behind schedule. The gems mined from the deposit barely covered the wages of the workers present. Fortunately, there was plenty of food and fresh water available in the area. From time to time, the forces hunted nearby beasts to gather gems and supplies as well. Kim's income amounted to about 3 low-class gems, since each gem of that class was worth 3 points. He continued to feel that he had overextended himself last time, especially regarding the soldiers he had summoned. Kim asked Dominic about the current troop count, and she replied that they had 42 soldiers, 2 knights, 1 mage, and 1 healer, due to some casualties in battles. The labyrinth leader noted that the larger the military force, the harder it became to manage, because with more explorations, more losses occurred in every fight. If it hadn't been for the summoned healer, more Nagas would have died and the entire troop might have been completely wiped out. The soldiers were very strong, yet they continued to die in battle, and the leader couldn't understand why the situation on the first floor had become so dire. Dominic quickly revealed that there was no first floor in the Naga labyrinth. Kim was shocked and baffled by this new information, his expression full of confusion, as this was completely unexpected. He argued that it couldn't be true, as he had arrived by falling from the first floor, and the deepest he had gone was the second floor. Dominic explained that the labyrinth might have devoured its master, and after he succeeded to the throne, it was returned to its original location. Sometimes labyrinths without masters choose potential leaders, as is had. The reason Kim found human items there in the absence of humans wasn't because the labyrinth was too isolated. The path he used with the reporter U was illegal and passed through the peak of the location. Kim asked his assistant what floor they were on, but she didn't know. The leader found this problematic, but reasoned that much time had passed, and there were safe areas even in the deepest parts. After thinking about the labyrinth's location, he asked where Rikshasha was, and Dominic responded that she was in the bar after finishing her patrol. Dominic questioned Kim's concern. He replied that it was absurd for the labyrinth master not to know which floor they were on. Given that the elf had been wandering the underworld for a long time, she might have a good idea of their location. Kim hurried to the bar, calling for his new employee and suspect. She said she was honored that her master had sought her out on his own. Dominic stated that they couldn't allow an ungrateful mercenary like Rikshasha to remain in the throne room. The elf responded with a remark that deeply offended and disrespected Dominic. After that argument, the two stared at each other with angry expressions, and Kim ordered them both to stop fighting immediately. The leader then asked Rikshasha the question he wanted to know. She recalled hearing how humans divided the underworld by depth, but having been born and raised there, she didn't fully understand the mortal's definition. Kim thought that what she said made sense in that moment. She then offered to share her past experiences before being hired, and Kim agreed that it was a good idea. Rikshasha had some unfortunate information to share with her master. Right next to the Naga labyrinth lived the Flood Dragon King, a being who had survived the underworld wars and was greatly feared. Kim was shocked by this news, and the elf added that, as far as she knew, the dragon had existed since the war broke out. Rikshasha explained that the labyrinth master in question was the Flood Dragon King Anaxtis, the strongest and most powerful protector of the throne. Kim found out from his assistant that the enemy was only 4 days away. She then mentioned the dragon's time on the throne and the strength he had gained through vast experience. If labyrinths didn't maintain a balance of power, the weaker one would usually be absorbed by the stronger one. Rikshasha had witnessed many wars between fierce, evil beasts during her time. She also mentioned that the nearby beasts seemed to be aware of the Naga labyrinth's existence, and Kim asked what she thought about it. Rikshasha responded that between the two labyrinths lay a territory ruled by a super predator, the bloodthirsty leopard. Several had attempted to subdue it with their forces but failed, and they wouldn't have done so without a clear motive. Kim asked about the elf's claim, and she confirmed it, explaining that they would need to take a detour around the bloodthirsty leopard's territory. Rikshasha mentioned that it would take at least 2 months, and her master celebrated, relieved to have some extra time. He then remarked to Dominic that she knew more than he had realized all along. Dominic responded by saying that she had worked with those beings before, which enraged Dominic even further. She angrily accused her colleague of being a spy, but the elf quickly asked not to be misunderstood. Rikshasha explained that she was just a mercenary doing what she was hired to do, and currently, she was serving the Naga labyrinth. Kim then said he had a few requests for her, which confused the elf because they weren't related to fighting or bloody battles. He wanted her to share all her knowledge and experiences and to scout the number of enemies in certain directions. He assured her not to worry about payment, as the enemies wouldn't suspect anything since she hadn't been expelled by them. The elf remained silent for a moment, holding her large cup of alcohol, then said it would take about a week. After Rikshasha left through the portal, Dominic commented that the elf had taken some food, and Kim mentioned that he too would need to start preparing soon. His assistant remarked that the elf was likely hiding something, to which Kim agreed. The enemy had asked a weak labyrinth to hire her even though they were on the brink of war, which meant there was definitely another motive. Kim doubted she was working for the Flood Dragon King, as she seemed more like an aggressive mercenary, but Dominic objected. When Rikshasha spoke of the monster, Dominic didn't feel any loyalty or sincerity in her words. Her master agreed, noting that he expected the elf would eventually sell information about the labyrinth. Despite Dominic's concerns, Kim believed sending Rikshasha was the right move since it would mislead their enemies and was part of his strategy. All the information Kim had shared was true, except for the part about them trembling in fear. There was even more to it. The elf had mentioned that Anaxtis had been hiding throughout the war. She had heard the humans possessed a weapon capable of killing him. Out of fear, he went into hiding. Now the Naga King belonged to the very species Anaxtis feared most. After telling Dominic all this, Kim left the labyrinth through the portal and told her to wait eagerly, as he would return in 3 days with a special gift. Meanwhile, the red-haired, brown-eyed girl woke up angrily to the sound of her phone ringing at full volume. Someone was calling her on her precious day off. Surprised, she looked at the phone and saw that Jin Wusei was calling. She had mistaken ideas about why he was calling. He simply wanted to know if she was still willing to repay a favor, and she responded affirmatively, saying he could ask for anything. 1 week after that brief call, on the expedition of the large yellow monster with sharp teeth and orange eyes, the beast let out a loud roar right there, bellowing fiercely. He declared that the Naga bastards were nothing and couldn't even scratch him. He boasted about his noble lineage, which placed him in a far superior class. He was a descendant of the perfect and grand dragons. One of his subordinates muttered that he was full of himself, almost getting scolded by another. One had forgotten how arrogant the leader was, boasting about epic events after a single unnecessary remark. He couldn't even keep his mouth shut when they crossed the bloodthirsty leopard's territory and barely survived. The large yellow monster overheard his subordinates' comments, and they quickly tried to remedy the situation to avoid punishment. They began flattering their master to cover up the offensive remarks they had made. The leader then asked when they would arrive at the Naga labyrinth because he was tired and wanted to rest on their throne. It was pointed out that the throne belonged to King Anaxtis and that he should be careful not to anger him as they spotted another small worker. There was a warrior, a sign that the labyrinth was near and not too far, and they had no idea of the enemy's approach. Suddenly, the little creature ran off, fleeing from the group of giant and terrifying enemies. Draken sprinted ahead, chasing after him to find the labyrinth, leaving his subordinates behind who called for him to wait. Draken managed to catch the little one and was about to make him pay for making him sweat so much during the chase. He shouted bravely and furiously, ordering the Naga to take him to the labyrinth immediately. Suddenly, someone asked if all dragon descendants were always that loud. He became enraged while Kim thanked his assistant for the task that had been assigned earlier. Draken demanded that they reveal themselves immediately, and he was met with the identity of the impressive and courageous king of Naga. Draken's subordinates said that they should report to Anaxtis that a human was the leader, but they were quickly silenced by their chief, who only wanted to kill Kim. The brown-haired boy lost his patience, having already heard about dragon descendants at least 50 times. He quickly ordered Dominic to initiate the plan they had devised immediately. Then the Nagas appeared, and Draken realized he had walked into a cowardly ambush. But soon he thought of something in that moment. All those warriors were just goofy, harmless workers. The little ones were pointing their weapons at the enemy with the intention of intimidating and killing him. Draken then began lecturing Kim for making those mini warriors work tirelessly, despite being so small and fragile. Dominic interrupted his ableist comments, insulting him and making him furious. He said that workers and servants were more than enough to deal with him. The fire alert was given immediately, making the yellow lizard quite fearful as all those shots were aimed at him with the intention of ending his life. The elf thinks of an overwhelming and terrifying darkness. The traps in the labyrinth existed simply to take the lives of intruders. Breaks there were unimaginable, food would be scarce, and even the workers were exploited in physical tasks until they died. That would be what a labyrinth represented for Rikshasha, as it clearly wasn't a human paradise. The elf finally arrives at the place where the mighty Flood King resides. She immediately informs him that she had already alerted the Naga labyrinth about his existence, and that they would be preparing for a major battle. However, the amount of earthly jewels they could acquire was limited due to the lack of labor. She was going to take advantage of their desperation to convince them to subdue the bloodthirsty leopard for the chance to gain a fortune. Rikshasha begs her master to invade the Naga labyrinth right after the battle with the feline, as they would be greatly weakened after the war. The Flood Dragon thanks his servant and confirms that he will follow her instructions immediately. He instructs his elf to give bad advice to the Naga labyrinth, as his team was heading there the next day. She was concerned about how long this would take, but her boss quickly reassured her, because he didn't plan to take such a common and normal route. Meanwhile, in the Naga labyrinth, Draken is attacked with several shots from all sides. The small, cute workers appear enthusiastic as they were fully focused on shooting. One of the enemies says there's no need to panic as human weapons were inferior and likely wouldn't be able to do any harm, but he's soon hit with a direct shot to his body. He is mistaken, as those weapons could indeed inflict serious injury and pain. When he realized the firepower of the weapons, he tried to ask his group to retreat, but unfortunately, it was already too late for that, because they were already surrounded and ambushed by the Nagas. Kim observed the entire war calmly, with a very tranquil expression. Those firearms had been manufactured illegally along with mass-produced ammunition, but the whole plan ended up failing and falling apart. The brown-haired girl says that the power of the weapons was greater than normal and informs him of the risks of using them. She questions him about why he used those weapons, and he responds saying he was just playing with them. Kim thinks those weapons were quite useful against the soldiers, but they weren't lethal, and Dominic seemed to like them a lot. He continues to silently and calmly observe the frantic war unfolding in front of him. Draken was being shot from all sides by the Nagas, and soon realizes that there wasn't a single scratch on his body. He makes a very happy and surprised face, and celebrates with a cute and cheerful little laugh. He quickly shouts for his enemies to realize that none of the attacks were even hurting him and were completely useless. Then Dominic fires frantically in his direction with great anger and rage, and he strikes a funny pose, mocking his enemies while being attacked. Out of nowhere, Draken is startled by a monster approaching him fearlessly and boldly. Suddenly, but he mocks the blow as it had been extremely weak, lacking power, even useless. And he lands a huge punch on the Naga, sending it flying far away, kicking up a lot of dust and dirt in the area. He mocks even more, saying that the Nagas really aren't worth much, and this makes Dominic extremely furious with those offensive remarks. She angrily says that that wretched creature is very annoying, holding a very large and pointed bullet in her hand. Kim says he would handle that cocky and arrogant enemy alone. Draken is impressed as he saw that the Labyrinth King was moving quickly, and he was already behind him, about to deliver a direct and deadly strike with a huge, sharp sword. After being struck by Kim, Draken screams in great pain, while the Naga King stares at him intently, with a fierce and angry expression. He fights frantically with that ugly yellow monster at that moment. The battle is very fierce between the two of them and was becoming highly contested. Draken yells ouch several times as he was feeling a lot of pain and agony. All those blows hurt that poor fellow a lot, and he decides to retaliate by delivering a very strong blow with his tail to Kim immediately. who flies far away from there, kicking up a lot of dirt and dust. All of his servants become very worried about it, but he says he's fine after that blow. Kim gets up amid so much dust and dirt, wondering what was wrong with that monster, because he was really strong and had a better physique than the infernal spiders, but he had terrible battle instincts. Everything seemed like a joke to Kim, or his enemy was just blatantly mocking him. Kim charges at Draken immediately, very fearless and courageous. The yellow monster shows an expression of total despair with everything that was happening, and soon receives a blow that makes him scream loudly in pain and desperation. Kim quickly notices something strange about that cute little yellow monster. It had no weak point, as even with the parasite strengthened in his body, nothing fragile was evident in Draken's body. The battle continues frenetically amidst the Naga Master's thoughts. Someone soon shouts that they managed to catch the enemy. Kim then says that, as expected, Draken, being a descendant of dragons, had the same weakness as them. But the yellow monster denies all of it. The Naga King reveals the weak point of that creature, which was the entire area between its shoulder blades, and he soon charges at his opponent with blood in his eyes, very fearless and courageous. That spot would be his next attack target, but he stops and widens his eyes, realizing something quite surprising at that moment. The aura around that monster had changed significantly all of a sudden. After hearing about its evident weak points, the ground was trembling along with the air vibrating a lot, as that creature was finally revealing its true nature. None of Kim's attacks would work, even before this happened, which is why he needed to strike it with everything he had before the enemy had a chance. The Labyrinth King rushes towards his opponent without a second thought, and soon realizes that the monster was motionless, not moving even a part of his body. Kim dashes past his enemy very quickly. The attack he planned seemed to have worked. Draken's entire weak point was fully exposed, but he hadn't even tried to dodge the blow, and it all seemed like a huge trap. Although Kim shouldn't overthink it, he just wanted a sign as to what the monster's plan was to defeat him. A few seconds before all of this, Draken was completely still with a very frightening and ominous expression. He was thinking about Kim's terrifying characteristics and how negligent the Flood Dragon King had been, because he had only said trivial things about Jinwoo Sai that weren't true, as he was very strong and powerful, making Draken fear for his own life. The places where the yellow monster had been struck would hurt for at least a month, making movement impossible. Draken then decides it's time to flee. He would pretend to be benevolent and then escape quickly. Out of nowhere, the monster realizes that his feared opponent had vanished, and then receives a direct, strong, and powerful blow to his body, which makes him scream in pain, agony, and deep despair. Seeing all his blood spilling made him fear for his life at that moment. Kim continued to attack his opponent mercilessly, with the intent to kill him. Draken feared even more for his life in the face of everything that was happening to him. He lies down on the ground, surprisingly full of fear amid the entire battle, leaving Kim very surprised by that very unusual action. All the Nagas also watch that monster with expressions of great surprise and confusion. And suddenly, Draken begins to beg and humiliate himself, asking for his life to be spared by the great Naga King. Dominic then informs her master that the Flood Dragon's soldiers have been defeated with total success. Kim quickly wonders what they would do with that poor yellow and fragile monster. They could make good use of the draconic materials. Killing Draken wouldn't be a problem, but processing him would, as normal attacks didn't even scratch him. The big yellow monster begs for his life, swearing to be completely loyal to the Labyrinth King forever. Kim is surprised, as Draken was betraying his current employer and could probably do the same to him. But the yellow and ugly monster swears in the name of the dragons that he would never betray the Naga King under any circumstances. That oath is impressive and makes the creature glow. Dominic is amazed by all of it, as she had never seen a dragon swearing before. The servant informs her master that dragons are very selfish, and that there was a restriction they placed on themselves, and that if they broke their own promise, they would die immediately from excruciating pain. But all of it was very strange, as Draken didn't even have wings, so he probably wasn't a pure-blood dragon, yet the oath had still worked. The monster confirms to Kim that all of Dominic's information was correct and affirms the penalty that occurred in his bloodline. All that creature's selfishness was quite insane, and the Naga King couldn't feel even a shred of nobility in him. Kim allows him to enter the labyrinth, as that resistant body would probably be useful in some way, and Draken thanks him greatly for that decision. A few days after all of this had happened, Draken was talking to Kim and claimed that the Flood Dragon King was more resilient and probably didn't have an obvious weak point either. Being used as a guinea pig, he tells his leader that he looked fine on the outside, but it all hurt a lot on the inside. Dominic would consider avoiding it, but Kim wanted to give that betrayal attack, and suddenly he fires that huge bullet into Draken's body, who groans in pain and agony. Since his new employee preferred all the pain in the world over death, the weapons would be tested on him. Suddenly, Rikshasha arrives at the scene, impressed by all of it, as she didn't expect to find Draken in that state. Kim finds out that the two of them already knew each other before, but they had different responsibilities, so they rarely saw each other. It seemed that stupid yellow lizard didn't remember Rikshasha. Kim asks his servant when the Flood Dragons would arrive. Rikshasha replies that they were all gathering their forces to prepare for the battle, and that after about a month, they would be ready. Even so, she didn't think that time was enough for their qualities to equalize, and Kim agreed with that, as that other labyrinth was many decades older. The elf had a risky suggestion for her leader, if he allowed it. It was the subjugation of the fearsome and strong, bloodthirsty leopard. The risks were great, but the highest quality jewels from the feline would be very useful for the battle against the flood dragon. The elf recommends that before the subjugation, Kim prepare for a week, because if he lost, it would be the end of everything he had built up until that moment. Dominic agrees with everything her friend said, as she wasn't wrong, and that seemed like the only way despite the imminent danger. Kim then asks his servant to create a very detailed map of the route to the bloodthirsty leopard's territory in just 2 days. Rakshasa could do that, but only up to the entrance of the place, so even so, everything would be in the hands of her beloved master's decision. Kim stares at Dominic for a few seconds without saying a single word, and says she could leave at that moment. Dominic asks where her master was going and if he would bring new weapons, and he responds in the negative. Kim reveals that he was spending all of his savings and would return before his elf did. Draken interrupts, asking when he would be allowed to move again. An hour after all of this, inside Gate D of Paju, Kim acknowledges that that point would be a good location. The green panel asks if he wanted to synchronize all the maps, and he responds with a full affirmation. A portion of the information regarding the labyrinths on the first, second, and third floors of the underworld had been synchronized. The map had become enormous and gigantic. Kim celebrates because now he had a passage to the place where he had hidden his earthly jewels before. During his last expedition, it had taken him about 4 days to go from the first to the third floor, and that was the time an adult man would take. Someone running would get there much faster than walking, and soon the leader asked the parasite to find all the earthly jewels within his possible vision. Kim thinks that the children of the dungeon surpass ordinary humans, while asking that the strength of his legs be increased as he prepares for the ritual. They would surpass not in tens of times, but in hundreds of times, while several panels appeared indicating the gain of several earthly jewels. Dominic hears a peculiar sound behind her. She realizes it's her master, who immediately asks about the events in the 2 days he had been gone, and she replies that everything was very quiet. Dominic asks Kim if anything had happened when he left, and he replies that he had only gone to the third floor of the underworld. The labyrinth leader empties his sack of various jewels, and the green panels quickly appear, saying they had been stored in the treasure. Dominic is impressed by the amount of earthly stones, but all of it would be thanks to the parasite. Kim thinks that all of it was of low quality and wasn't worth much, which is why they didn't even come close to being enough for the war. He would need to figure out how to use them, because if he summoned hundreds of rank 1 and 2 soldiers, their attacks would be useless. Kim talks to his servant about the time they had to improve the labyrinth before the arrival of the Flood Dragon troops. He decides to bet everything because after the improvement, he would generate rank 5 soldiers to fight in the war. He would summon some units at that moment as well, just as a precaution. Out of nowhere, the green panel reveals that there was a rank 4 unit nearby, and Kim had completely forgotten about it. So he decides to summon a very strong and fierce Naga Guardian. Rakshasa then arrives at the labyrinth at that moment, thinking about the strategies and shortcuts the Flood Dragon might use to get there faster. The enemies would arrive in about a week via the path through the bloodthirsty leopard's territory, and then the war would begin immediately. No matter how hard the Naga labyrinth worked, their chances of victory were 0. Suddenly, Rakshasa comes across the new guardians of the place ready to attack her. Kim immediately orders them to stop, as she was a mercenary and worker there. He then asks about the map, and she responds that it was ready to be used. The leader congratulates his servant, who is impressed by the new soldiers. She tells her boss that he would have a chance to subdue the bloodthirsty leopard with those forces, leaving him confused. Some would be in charge of guarding the labyrinth while Kim was away. The others had another role, which was to participate in the subjugation with full effort and dedication. They would be the elite of the Naga labyrinth after all. They were the only ones with battle experience, and Rakshasa questions all of this, because those forces wouldn't come close to succeeding, but Kim informs her that he would fight alongside everyone, and that wouldn't be a problem. The elf continues questioning it all, as the chances of being wiped out and losing their lives were huge. Kim gets angry because that servant was underestimating his soldiers. She regrets it and thinks she was foolish to think they might even stand a chance. Jinwoo-si asks if she rested while she was away, and she responds affirmatively. The plan was for her to be the guide of the long-awaited and difficult mission. They would immediately set out to subdue the bloodthirsty leopard. Rakshasa thinks that he only asked her to make the map to get her out of the way, and it was useless, no matter what she did. Finally, they head towards their objective. The elf informs them that they had arrived in the bloodthirsty leopard's territory, and that the soldiers should be ordered to remain completely silent from now on. The mission was difficult, even more so with the risk of an ambush, as the enemy was a specialist in stealth. Kim notices the nervousness of his servant, which was caused by the dominance of the bloodthirsty leopard in that region for several decades. The elf didn't want to die while doing her mercenary work. Even though she had agreed to be the guide for the mission, it was still very dangerous, as the chances of ending up dead were enormous. She was feeling a controlled but heavy killing intent all around her, sending chills down her spine. That was a strong sign that the bloodthirsty leopard was very close. In fact, the enemy was right behind her. He tells her that she would die the moment she looked back. At that moment, he was going to interrogate her. But it was just Kim saying that she didn't seem to like the way he managed that labyrinth, leaving her very confused. Jin-Woo-sai talks about the calm characteristics of his workplace and his workers, and says he understood why his servant thought that way. But he informs her that he was also born in a dungeon and knew very well how things worked there. He takes care of his allies and kills his enemies, and he still didn't know what she was about, even though she claimed to be just a mercenary doing her job. He already knew that Rikshasha had deceived the Naga labyrinth and sold its information to the dragon, but even so, he gave her a chance to defend herself. She defends herself, saying that she had worked for the enemy before, but that wasn't enough reason to be interrogated that way. The leader had been discourteous in the first contact. However, if she were a spy for the Dragon King, she would never have revealed that she had worked for him in the past. Rikshasha feels offended after working so hard, but it didn't seem like she was always telling the truth. She gets angry and says that her master is mistaken because she had always told him only the facts. He didn't understand one thing amidst everything that was happening. What was her goal, and why did she keep going back and forth between the two labyrinths like that? She responds by saying that she had no concrete objectives and that he had no evidence. He asks her if she had ever heard of parasites. She replies that she knew about them but had never seen one up close, and then he reveals that one was in her body at that exact moment, and she also had one in her system. Suddenly, the parasite begins to reveal itself on the elf's arm. When Kim had first seen her, he had placed a fragment in her body, and the creature had enjoyed the journey with the elf. He was able to take a full tour of the Flood Dragon's labyrinth. Rikshasha remains silent, her face filled with agony from having that thing inside her body. After all that, Kim would still give her another chance because he had started to like her. He stares at her for a few seconds. She admits to having underestimated him greatly, as in truth she had no connection to the Flood Dragon's labyrinth nor to the Naga. She only sought her own revenge against the so-called king of spirituality, who seemed to torment her frequently. She looks back and thinks she's going to die. Kim had already said that Rikshasha would die if she looked back and charges at her. She falls to the ground after that surprise attack. Her face is filled with pain and confusion. The bloodthirsty leopard was there and hadn't even been noticed. Kim then realizes the presence of that fearsome enemy and begins attacking it frenetically at that moment. The blows are so powerful that they even crack the ground beneath them. The battle is fierce and contested between the two. The elf thinks her boss is blending into the midst of the war and that he was very fast too. But there was a catch in all of this that was happening at that moment. Kim's expression and body changed completely. The monster could see all of it. Rikshasha is filled with fear, her face showing deep concern. While the battle raged on frenetically in front of her, the fight was intense and everything nearby was being destroyed. Although the elf knew that Kim had become a labyrinth master while still being human, she continued to underestimate him. No matter how strong he was, he would still be fragile, and her opinion hadn't changed. But it was out of the question to continue thinking that way, and her boss calls her to battle immediately. They would continue the conversation after the fight, and she could flee if she wanted, but there was a catch to it all. If they crossed paths again, Rikshasha wouldn't even be able to speak, and then she thinks he's a monster born of the labyrinth. Rikshasha asks her boss if he can see the bloodthirsty leopard, and he responds affirmatively. It wasn't moving and was probably trying to recover from the battle. It was the first time Kim had used so much power from the parasite, and his stamina was dropping. If it continued, he would have to fight without that aid. The bloodthirsty leopard was moving and he needed to end it quickly. There was another enemy there at that moment. This one had blood in its eyes, attacking the Nagas relentlessly. Kim quickly rushes towards his opponent, his eyes filled with bloodlust, intending to kill him. And he tries to strike him immediately with all of his strength and power. He curses the bloodthirsty leopard furiously. It tires him and reminds him of that time with the infernal spider. He asks the parasite to conserve its strength because if they kept going like this, they would be powerless before they could defeat the two bloodthirsty leopards. Rikshasha was about to help the Nagas immediately, but is scolded by her boss. She should just observe the situation, as Kim didn't want any help from her at that moment. Under no circumstances should his soldiers ever be underestimated by someone like that elf. The Nagas were well prepared and alert at that moment. A lot of magic was being used there amid the war, because the mage wasn't doing well and would die from that attack if they stopped healing him. He was special to the Naga king, and the soldiers would protect him at all costs, until the leader arrived to try to ease the situation. That creature had blood in its eyes with a very angry and serious expression. The bloodthirsty leopard was also willing to do anything to win that battle. The fight is frenzied between the two monsters and highly contested. They stare at each other, warring furiously, full of anger and rage. Those yellow eyes express a strong desire to win the battle. But it soon takes a very strong and powerful blow to its body, and flies far away, kicking up a lot of dust and dirt in the area. It falls to the ground, looking very battered and almost defeated. His eyes express a lot of pain and anguish at that moment. But even so, the fight continued at full throttle around it. The Green Naga was trying with all its might to hurt the bloodthirsty leopard to defeat it with its sharp and small weapon, but it quickly gets a strong stomp on its tail and is fatally bitten in its fragile neck. The yellow-eyed Naga watches all of it, deeply anguished and afraid, while thinking about its labyrinth. He had fallen at some point, and finally, after decades, he had risen again and stabilized, and he would be the honorable first soldier. An oath had been made by him. He promised to survive until he could personally witness the changes Kim had made to ensure they would not fall again. But all that oath made alongside the king, amidst that difficult battle, unfortunately, could not be fulfilled as it should have been. That enemy was very strong and fearless. But still, the Nagas did not give up that fight. They fought with all the strength and determination they had. Blows were struck at the bloodthirsty leopard, which screamed desperately in pain and agony. Suddenly, the panel appears, informing that the requirements have been met. Amidst the war between the Nagas and the bloodthirsty leopards, it also informs that the Hall of Heroes was responding to the Naga soldier's wish, who was fighting tirelessly for his labyrinth. He wondered how he could call himself a strong and fearless soldier when he should have been protecting the king and was there, fearing death, waiting for the king to protect him. But today, he would die alongside him. The panel informs that the Naga soldier's heroification had begun. The soldier screams in pain and agony during his transformation, and strikes his enemy hard with his tail, sending it flying far, raising a lot of dust and dirt, screaming even more in pain, agony, and fear. But the soldier, with blood in his eyes, does not stop attacking. He prepares his fists for another strong, powerful, and precise blow, and successfully strikes the body of that terrifying and fearsome enemy, which groans even more in pain, agony, and fear at that moment, flying far again, raising a lot of dirt and dust in the area. The soldier thought that monster was supposed to be the top predator of that territory, and that this was all a huge disappointment. The elf thinks that heroification had no chance. It seemed that the leader had brought few soldiers because he already knew this would happen, and it all seemed very impossible. One of the prerequisites for heroification is that the individual must have a certain level of experience, and this would only happen after the subject gained enlightenment. However, this could not be predicted by the being undergoing that process, and it was definitely not something that could be intentionally activated by anyone. But taking into consideration the things the boss had sent to the elf, he probably had more surprises to reveal. For he was the grand and magnificent king of the entire Naga labyrinth. The green panel appears again, informing that the heroification had been successfully completed, leaving Kim very confused about everything that was happening. He didn't know what had occurred, but one thing he was certain of. It was that he didn't need to hold back anymore. There was still one bloodthirsty leopard left to defeat at that moment, and that opponent would be very easy for the Naga soldier. He immediately widens his eyes, staring at his enemy with great rage and fury. A Naga quickly delivers a strong, powerful punch to the ugly enemy, which groans in pain, agony, and fear. And the new hero also charges mercilessly at the opponent, who was already completely finished and destroyed. The soldier challenges his enemy to attack him because it seemed like all the energy he had earlier had vanished, and he was being quite cowardly at that moment. The elf thinks that's not how bloodthirsty leopards usually fight. It seemed they were just hiding to recover from the battle. She also reasons that even after heroification, the soldier is not stronger than his master, who has many more abilities. On top of that, he still had to protect the wounded Nagas, and this situation didn't favor him in any way. Even so, everyone was united in this great and difficult battle. The mage seemed to be getting better, but he shouldn't move too much at that moment, as his organs had been compromised and any sudden movement was very dangerous. While the soldier was talking about his companion's condition, he is suddenly cowardly attacked by the fearsome and grand bloodthirsty leopard. But the mage immediately jumps into action without a second thought, and is reprimanded at that very moment, because he was on the brink of death, but even so, he had created a barrier so that the soldier wouldn't have to worry about the well-being of the rest of the Nagas anymore. Even if the warrior used all his power, he couldn't break that barrier, so he could go all out against the enemy without mercy, according to the mage. The soldier disagreed with everything his friend had said, but he also advises him to make a cover over the ground, because he was about to do something right there, which was to blow up the entire place. With his blow, the entire ground cracks into several pieces. He faces his opponent with a fearless and courageous expression, and continues the battle with all his strength and determination, using all his power and the experiences he had gained. He grabs a giant stone and holds it firmly, then throws it with all the strength and power in the world at the bloodthirsty leopard, which screams loudly in pain, agony, and despair. After that blow, the enemy becomes extremely enraged with bloodlust in its eyes, seeking revenge. It roars loudly with the intent of intimidating the soldier. It tries to strike the warrior with its large, sharp claws, but he manages to defend himself from what would have been a deadly fatal blow. He even manages to hold his opponent's huge claw, and quickly realizes that the enemy was using his tactic again. But this time, it would not escape again. The soldier stares at his enemy for several seconds without saying a single word. That creature was being very cunning, using his opponent's barrier to his advantage, gaining protection. He was hiding behind the wall created by the mage, who was his enemy. The soldier even remarks that the monster was underestimating them too much. Out of nowhere, the creature is caught around the neck. The soldier had captured it successfully. The warrior pauses for a moment to think, then decides to bite his opponent with his sharp, pointed teeth immediately. That unexpected bite is very strong and powerful, and makes the enemy groan once again in pain, agony, and fear. The Naga soldier mocks his opponent, as he was only just beginning. The monster lets out its final cries of despair, and collapses unconscious on the ground with its mouth open, like discarded trash. The victor of the battle remarks that his enemy was quite persistent, and looks back hearing a strange and different noise. It was his leader congratulating him for all the great and beautiful war. He just needed some time, and his soldier had managed to finish all the work on his own, without any help. Even after doing a great job, he laments the loss of an important ally, and for that reason he receives a stern lesson from his master, for no death was in vain, as they were all Nagas, equal, and with the same responsibilities. The scolding was also for the armed workers, as they lost their lives while fighting fearlessly, and that didn't make them any different or better. That soldier was getting too full of himself for having become stronger and needed to stop ranking his allies based on their merits. The elf watches the entire lecture from a distance, attentive to Kim's criticism of his subordinate instead of offering praise. For a soldier, criticism was more beneficial than congratulations, and Rakshasa couldn't question the leader's qualifications as king. Since the warrior had made 2 great achievements, Kim decided to reward him. He calls his subordinate by the name of Quintus, as it was a historical name used by great military generals, and that hero would need an identity that matched his title. From that moment on, the leader reveals that Quintus would be the general of the Naga army, leaving him quite impressed and excited. The soldier swears loyalty and allegiance to his grand king, and says he will return to the labyrinth as ordered, carrying the monster's body on his back, being asked about the creature's weight. But he responds by saying it wasn't heavy and that he would be careful, as he already knew the creature was still alive. Kim laments having to discard the rest of the bloodthirsty leopard, as its skin wasn't durable enough to make armor. But he is satisfied with the high-quality stone, which the green panel affirms contains the enemy's power within. It also states that the leader would be able to awaken the power of the jewel with a special refining method, but a laboratory and a forge would be needed for that. He couldn't believe what he had acquired after the battle. It would be a waste to simply throw it on the altar. So since the elf hadn't fled by that moment, she had passed some sort of test. Rakshasa denies having taken any test, flattering her master, who immediately reprimands her, and asks why they shouldn't continue their conversation right now. Kim describes his servant's claims in an interrogative tone, as she had claimed to have found the labyrinth while seeking revenge against the spiritual king. And ultimately, she was using the flood dragon, which would wipe out Naga to declare war on her own enemy. The leader had gotten it all right, but some details were missing, which he couldn't hear because there wasn't enough free time to understand his servant. So he quickly asks when the Flood Dragon King would arrive, knowing he had departed some time ago, and he is given an estimated time of 5 days by his elf. He thought it would be at least 2 weeks, and the time was probably too short to improve the labyrinth, leaving Rakshasa confused. Even with the parasite linked to her, her boss didn't know that detail. Kim explains that it was all a big lie and a farce, leaving the white-haired, yellow-eyed girl even more confused. He reveals that the parasite had died quickly, and the other one, which was in the elf's body, had been placed during a previous conversation. She is surprised, realizing her boss was only acting due to his suspicions, and he confirms that it was a well-executed, successful act. Kim is amazed, as even after deceiving 2 kings, Rakshasa acted as if she was still right, and she remarks that disappointment is also one of her skills. She completely agrees with her trustworthy and cool boss. Since the Naga king didn't have much time, he would give his servant 2 options and wouldn't kill her, depending on her choice. She would have to choose between the 2 labyrinths. If she joined the Naga labyrinth, the boss would help her with her revenge, but if she chose otherwise, something bad would certainly happen. She asked for more time to think about the difficult matter, at least until the war, leading Kim to believe she just wanted to side with whoever won. He transforms, as Rakshasa thought it was all just a joke. She still hadn't understood her inferior position and the luck she had in still being alive, so she shouldn't test Kim's patience. Now she would have to choose immediately between the easily manipulated king or the newest ruler of the entire place. Some time after that dark and tense conversation, the Nagas were all gathered in the labyrinth, and suddenly, the king arrives at the scene. He is surprised because everyone had arrived safely after the difficult and ominous war. Dominic quickly gets angry at the presence of the elf, but is reprimanded by her boss. She congratulates him on the victory in the war. Kim thanks her, and asks if she had already introduced herself to Quintus, the newest general. Dominic laughs, as the guy was the same as before and had only changed his appearance, and the leader admits to being mistaken. Quintus reprimands, saying that his king never makes mistakes, and if he wanted them to introduce themselves, it should be obeyed by everyone without overthinking. The general automatically pretends not to know his friend and starts introducing himself, leaving Kim a bit confused, finding everything happening in front of him strange. Soon the leader asks if his subordinate successfully conveyed the message he wanted, and is given full affirmation. Dominic thinks it was worth trying all of it, but the mage had been injured, so Kim quickly says he will summon more of them immediately, without hesitation. The leader reveals to his servant that they didn't have much time, leaving her very confused. and quickly explains that there were only 5 days left before the dragon enemies arrived for the war, surprising and worrying her with this information. Dominic growls at Rikshasha but is reprimanded by her master, as she was now truly part of the team without falsehoods or betrayals. He then asks the elf to tell everything to his loyal lieutenant and not to involve her personal feelings in the conversation. He gives instructions on Quintus's work and orders him to train all the soldiers in 3 days, following only what he said, without exaggerations or unnecessary complexity. When questioned by his subordinate, Kim responds that he would go underground to gather some earthly stones and try to acquire more weapons. And that after 3 days, he would return and form a plan based on Rikshasha's information, whose job was to patrol the area. He tells all his employees not to worry at all, as the enemy was only a little stronger than the horned rats they had faced before. The enemies were already moving at that moment and preparing to attack the Naga labyrinth mercilessly. Anaxtis, the Grand King, had already summoned all his subjects and subordinates by that time. He announces that the fearsome and strong heroes Azog and Urjag would be on the front line of the battle. Azog was the flood hero, while Urjag was the flood champion, and they were to finish off all the Naga before Anaxtis arrived. 5 days later, at the front of the Naga labyrinth, the invasion was already in progress. Dominic informs her boss that the preparations had been completed, and then the final briefing would begin with his approval and permission granted. Naga possessed 90 soldiers, 10 warriors, 6 archers, 4 healers, 5 mages, and 2 guardians for that grand battle. On the other hand, the enemy had a total of 121 soldiers, including 100 regulars, 18 warriors, and 2 medium-sized flood dragons, and another, who seemed to be a fearsome and grand hero. Kim says that, as Rikshasha had informed, the enemies didn't have long-range units, which was typical of flood dragons. Despite possessing overwhelming defensive power and mass, they were slow and lacked that quality as the elf had mentioned some time ago. Kim thought they would only withstand a few attacks, but the enemies had apparently found a way to overcome those 2 disadvantages. Dominic screams to her master, very worried, with a look of surprise and despair. The enemy vanguard could already be seen clearly from where they stood. They all marched imposingly and bravely toward the Naga labyrinth. Kim laments as the panel informs him that there hadn't been enough time to fully upgrade the labyrinth. Dominic then informs him that the enemies were taking exactly the route Rikshasha had mentioned earlier, making the first condition successfully fulfilled. The commanders order their subjects to hold their positions, raise the first line of defense, and follow the plan they had made. Kim speaks with Draken, knowing that he wasn't happy about being used as target practice for various types of weapons. He wanted Draken to prove that he was a descendant of dragons, victorious, brave, and fearless. Draken observes all those enemies with a look of shock and fear. Azog is surprised to see him again, having thought that he had died brutally and fatally. But he hadn't died. Instead, he had submitted to the Nagas and was working with them and for their king. Draken is disappointed with his former friend's greeting and listens as Azog remarks that dealing with him was always stressful, and they were even colleagues. Azog says that he had always heard rumors about the Drakens, knowing that Draken boasted about his lineage, but it was just a story to hide his weaknesses. Draken becomes furious at those words and is offended again, hearing that he was just a little lizard and nothing more than a nearly extinct species. He also hears that the flood dragons had relatives and probably had more family blood than him. He's told to stay in his place based on all this information. His enemy stares at him for several seconds without saying a word, and then asks if he would surrender or attack alone, with no one to help him. But it didn't matter, because the Naga forces were pathetic, and compared to his vanguard, they would need much more quantity and quality to win. It seemed that the mages were planning something, so the enemy thought it wouldn't hurt to take a little extra caution. He quickly orders his fellow flood dragons to attack immediately, and to crush all the Nagas there. He also says that when the armies clashed, one of his allies would infiltrate the flood dragons into the mages' area, while he himself would deal with that yellow lizard alone. He leaps bloodthirstily toward his former colleague, intending to exterminate him, and informs him that for old time's sake, he would give him a completely painless death. The enemy stares at Draken with blood in his eyes and a furious look of rage, and tries to strike him with a sharp hatchet. His blow seems quite ineffective at that moment, and everything he tried with all his might seemed to have no effect, leaving him with a face full of anger and frustration. Kim then notices that his soldier was exposing his back again, which was a major improvement. Dominic worries about whether Draken would be okay, as he looked the same as before, but her master quickly reassures her. Because, as everyone knew, Draken was very afraid of dying, and thanks to that, he was very good at analyzing the strength of all his opponents. He wasn't just there taking hits, he was measuring his enemy's potential intelligently, while taking some strong blows. And the reason he was exposing his back was to find out if his opponent knew about weak points, which was why Draken's species was so strong. Dominic had never realized this, and Kim only learned about it after Draken had joined the team. Meanwhile, the enemy was getting increasingly angry and admitted that his opponent wasn't just a weak lizard, but he was a hero of the flood dragons, and Draken would never be able to handle all his power. Then the enemy strikes even harder with the intention of killing him. Of one thing, the Naga labyrinth leader was certain. Draken was declared the second strongest as the panel appeared, informing that he had risen to a very high level of heroism. The enemy was incredulous at the information he had just seen. Draken became furious because his opponent believed he had more dragon blood than him. He declares that there was something called basic monster qualities, and he wanted to see if that guy could copy all of that. The enemy begs, imploring Draken to stop immediately. And suddenly, an extremely bright yellow light floods the area, raising a lot of dust and dirt in the process. The enemy groans in pain and agony as his ugly face was apparently ripped off by the strike from the large yellow lizard. Draken mocks his opponent, believing that dragon descendants had one thing in common: they were completely immune to hot, burning fire. Draken firmly holds the torn-off piece of his opponent's body and quickly throws it far away from the scene. He strikes a very masculine and strange pose to show off to his friends and opponents. The other enemies are left in disbelief as the hero and commander had been defeated easily without much effort. Everyone wanted to flee desperately, as the Navies now had a true dragon on their side. After that, they all had expressions of fear and worry. Then the command ordered the formation to be set and the mage to infiltrate. One of them seemed very confused by the information, and suddenly the rest appeared ready for yet another difficult battle. Dominic informs her master that the flood dragons were being thrown back, and Kim says he didn't intend to waste arrows on those mere weaklings. He then orders two of the mages to focus on defense. Quickly, one of the Nagas listens to that, and suddenly, all the mages seemed ready for anything. Out of nowhere, they begin using all their magic to fully defend the labyrinth, constructing sharp, spiked barriers, where enemies were easily trapped. One of them even celebrated the fact that he was still alive after being trapped. All of this was a huge revolt. One of the enemies begged them to wait, because others were coming to help him. They were all furious, with looks of pure rage. Kim observed everything calmly and quietly, and soon orders Dominic to tell the Namek Guardians to throw the enemies back to their leader, as they needed to lure them into the defensive formation they had set up. Speaking of which, Kim asks his servant about the tactic, and she responds that Draken was holding the center, preventing any potential damage. After witnessing the commander's defeat, the dragon's soldiers dispersed to the flanks, and it was only a matter of time before they applied pressure. Upon hearing this from her master, Dominic asks if the traps could be activated, and Kim responds negatively. He then orders Quintus to instruct Draken to protect the left flank while he himself would guard the right, as they couldn't afford to be overwhelmed. Suddenly, the elf calls out to her dear and powerful master. She had a very defeated and sad look on her face at that moment. She brought very important and useful information about the enemy's main unit. It seemed that the Flood Dragon King was already approaching. A huge sound is heard suddenly in the area, and everyone looks with a terrified and worried expression at the noise. More enemies seem to be on the way, and they would be even stronger than the others. Kim and Rikshasha are stunned by everything happening. All of this was the Flood Dragon King, master of all dragons, the unshakable and Grand Anaxtis. The enemy's main unit had approximately 300 soldiers, 150 regulars, and the rest high-ranked. There were also around 30 medium-sized flood dragons being launched, and the number of high-level enemies was concerning. Dominic quickly tries to inform her master of an action by the Grand King Anaxtis. He was slowly moving his hand, with a giant, sharp claw. A loud sound is emitted by an instrument played, leaving everyone in total attention. The war was heating up and becoming even more intense. All the enemies had furious expressions of rage, and suddenly, they all begin to move. Dominic then informs her master of the start of the enemy's attack, and he quickly orders them to focus on the aerial units and instructs the archers to remain patient, as it wasn't yet time to counterattack. The servant becomes worried, as if the opponents invaded it would be a disaster, but she's quickly reassured by Kim, who insists they needed to wait a little longer. They observe everything with very concerned expressions. Dominic tries to speed up the process, but her master wasn't in a hurry, as not even half of the high-level soldiers were in their proper positions. He then orders them to send everyone to the Great Abyss, and Dominic immediately commands the mages to stop all spells quickly. The troops had to join the ongoing battle immediately. The leader of the enemy horde suddenly halted the attack that was in progress. He soon faced the wrath of his allies, as it seemed he wanted to be trampled by everyone behind him. He noticed a lot of ice integrated into the ground, and suddenly, it was spreading among all his comrades, leaving them in complete despair at that moment. It seemed they had become trapped in that cold, hard substance. Quintus quickly gave an immediate order to be followed. The elf realized that they had used illusion magic to transform the cliff into a dusty ground. She remarked that the enemy wouldn't have fallen for it if they had been more attentive, to which her master replied that only she and Draken had survived. And since the two of them were now allies, he didn't believe any information had been leaked to the enemies. Kim then asked Dominic for the damage report, and she responded that 20 Naga soldiers and 1 warrior had died in the fight. Meanwhile, the entire enemy vanguard, along with nearly 20% of the main unit, seemed to have fallen into the trap, leaving about 250 enemies remaining. They were defending the labyrinth at great cost and would use a phalanx formation, with Draken and Quintus heading to the front lines immediately. The soldiers behind them were to spread out to minimize the impact of the flood dragons and kill them upon landing. They couldn't allow the dragons to accumulate at the rear, so Kim ordered Dominic to announce the enemy's weakness again. The elf then asked her master where he had learned these military tactics, to which he replied that it was from the games humans enjoy playing. She was left perplexed, realizing that war was merely play and foolishness for mere mortals. Kim remarked that now all they had to do was wait for luck, while the elf mentioned something was bothering her at the moment. It seemed that something was very strange about the enemy's main units. No siege type or champion flood dragons had been spotted yet. Suddenly, a large explosion occurred right there, raising a lot of dust and dirt. Dominic quickly called out to her beloved master, informing him that the enemies had breached the right wall of the labyrinth. Something hideous was appearing there at that moment. Kim soon learned from his servant that the ugly creature was a siege-type flood dragon. It was the size of an adult infernal spider, and if it reached the Nagas, it would do far more than just decimate the formation. Suddenly, the master was informed that the dragons were entering through the broken wall. They were champion in class, and there were heroes among them, along with the elite of the Flood Dragon's labyrinth. The champions were approaching the center of the formation, and the siege-type dragon was at that moment, racing towards Dominic and Kim with all the speed in the world. The labyrinth master then ordered a change in formation for his subjects, especially for the defense lines. Dominic mentioned that Quintus had just become a hero and wouldn't be able to defeat a heroified champion, which meant the entire Naga army would be annihilated. The defensive formation would collapse if Draken didn't assist, and Rikshasha volunteered to help the general. She requested her master's permission to do so. Kim hesitated to give approval, as even though she was confident she could survive, the battle seemed beyond her true capacity. However, permission was granted for Rikshasha and Quintus to fight the hero-level champions, while the main enemy troops would be dealt with by the bloodthirsty leopard on the bridge, who would be pulled in by the mages. They were already on their way toward it. A lot of magic was being used at that very moment. The mages spared no effort in using their mana, until suddenly a huge explosion erupted, sending several enemies flying through the air. One of them looked terrified after falling to the ground, kicking up a lot of dust and dirt. The enemy leader watched all of it, growing angrier and more furious. He stood up, fearless and courageous. Dominic asked her master what they would do next, and she was reassured that this was not their first battle. Kim transformed completely, in a bizarre and terrifying way. The enemies observed everything with faces full of rage and fury, roaring with a tone of anger and intimidation as they watched that strange and grotesque transformation. After healing the leopard, it hadn't eaten for 5 days, so it would try to devour everything in its path, which would result in a significant gain. Kim then orders Dominic to move away immediately from the area. He thrusts his hand into that strange object and grabs something firmly. Out from the stones emerges a powerful, enormous, and very heavy weapon. Kim says that this club is perfect for taking down the tough adversaries present. Dominic warns him that he needs to conserve his energy to fight the Flood Dragon King, and he replies that he will try. The enemy was extremely enraged and furious at that moment, with a bloodthirsty gaze, hungry for death and victory. Kim charges at him with that giant, heavy club, even celebrating how easily he was able to get so close to his enemy. But suddenly, his eyes widen with a concerned and alert expression. He tells Dominic to run quickly and get away from there. He realizes that his opponent's main target wasn't him, but rather, the monster was heading toward the center of the labyrinth where Dominic stood in front. He calls out for his dear servant, who assures him that she's fine at the moment, as the creature got stuck at the gate of the Naga labyrinth, and its goal was clear: the fragile core at the center of the labyrinth. Draken is ordered to retreat immediately, but his master grabs him as there wasn't enough time to wait for the lizard to move so slowly. Kim hurls Draken far away to stop the enemy and prevent it from reaching the labyrinth core. Draken is terrified of the siege-type dragon, but Kim reassures him. Draken even becomes more confident than usual, thinking highly of himself. The monsters fight while the boss tells his subordinate to hold the line so he can defeat the Great King. Kim asks for a battle report, and this is what he hears. Thanks to the bloodthirsty leopard, both groups had safely retreated to the second line of defense and were currently dealing with the Flood Dragon. More than 20% of the units fighting the champions had died, and knowing this, the boss orders the archers to fire the enemies immediately. As for Quintus and Rikshasha, the two were fighting the enemy hero, but despite being 2 against 1, they were still being pressured. Kim is disappointed by this news, but not all the information is bad. The bloodthirsty leopard was performing better than expected, and it even prevented the enemy's main unit from advancing and had forced them to retreat. Kim thought the feline would devour several dragons before using its stealth to escape, and the parasite remarked that the cat was underestimating the enemies after defeating them. It also informs him that if it continued like this, the bloodthirsty leopard might even reach the Flood Dragon King, leaving Kim quite excited and thrilled by the updates. The enemies scream in desperation, claiming that the Nagas had tamed the feline. They look filled with fear and terror. The great and fearsome bloodthirsty leopard, with blood in its eyes, observes everything. Its prey looked furious, with expressions of rage, and immediately lets out a loud roar, intending to intimidate its easy meal. The leopard launches a powerful, fatal attack, but suddenly, a giant hand grabs it firmly by the neck. Its claws had led it straight to the strongest enemy there, and this was quite a repulsive move on its part. Suddenly, an enormous and powerful light fills the area. Everyone watches, extremely worried and tense about the situation. Dominic then informs Kim that half of the left flank had been wiped out and that the fearsome flood dragon was up to something. It had just joined the battle at that moment. Fighting together in that spot were Rikshasha and Quintus. She takes a strong, direct hit from the enemy, which must have hurt quite a bit at the time. Her friend immediately calls out her name, very concerned about what had just happened, and asks if she's okay, to which she replies positively, saying only one of her arms had been dislocated and couldn't be used. She thinks that things weren't looking good. It was clear that the enemies were stronger than expected and would have been even better if the Flood Dragon King wasn't so passive. The enemy had a lot of experience but hadn't had the right opportunity to develop. He was Urjag, hero and Flood champion. At that moment, Draken was successfully holding off the siege-type dragon, and the Grandmaster needed to conserve his energy to fight the fearsome enemy king. The bloodthirsty Leopard was also holding back the main unit. Suddenly, something very surprising is witnessed by the two friends, who are filled with shock. They quickly inform their master that the king himself was now joining the battle. She asks if Quintus can still fight, to which he replies with a firm yes, but they knew they had little chance of winning that war. They just needed to hold on as long as they could, until the master of the entire Naga labyrinth defeated the Flood Dragon King without mercy. Kim then looks at the green panel in his hand, which informs him of the time needed to complete the level 5 upgrade. The strongest enemy is impressed, as he didn't expect to see a human in that place. He never imagined that the Nagas would hire such a fragile, mortal, and weak human mercenary. The monster then asks the boy where his king is, and depending on the answer, his life might even be spared. In fact, the boy could even switch sides in this great war, but the monster was completely mistaken, because that person who seemed completely weak, fragile, and powerless was the king of the entire grand place they were battling in. Kim then tries to land a powerful, strong kick right to the enemy's horns, only to realize that the enemy wasn't even blinking at those blows. Apparently, he was more resilient than Draken and didn't have any exposed weaknesses. Almost every part of his body was strong and protected. The enemy says that he would let the boy live because he was a rare species, but he could never have imagined that a mere human would be ruling a labyrinth. Kim then mocks his enemy a lot, who was standing there at that moment. It seemed like a bluff from the opponent to hide the fact that he was terrified of the human weapons that were right there. The monster, furious at hearing all of that, delivers a huge blow in anger. Kim is sent flying far away amidst smoke and dust. He thinks to himself that his opponent is quite fast and surprising, able to move so swiftly with such a large body. The monster then lunges with its claws toward the grand protagonist. Kim immediately changes his body, taking on a monstrous and demonic appearance, as the fearsome opponent leaps into the air right there. Kim wanted to avoid using the parasite too much, but his enemies seemed to expect more strength and power from him. His expression changes completely again, becoming even more bizarre than before. Suddenly, a massive explosion of fire occurs right there. Dominic is very worried and calls out for her below to Master. She then asks Draken why the king was breathing fire, and he replies that flood dragons are distant relatives of real dragons. He also explains that the king has enough blood to use fire attacks, leaving Dominic both surprised and concerned by this information. She remarks that human weapons could kill a flood dragon king, and her master says that it wasn't just any ordinary fire weapon. But she wonders how something so small could be so strong and powerful. The enemy notices that Kim had split into two, but it didn't matter to him in the least. Something approaches from behind, unnoticed. Kim, looking bizarre with bloodshot eyes, is stared down by his enemy, filled with rage and fury. Then something strikes the monster's back with force. He momentarily screams in pain at that moment, and says that that little trick had been quite useless. The parasite was becoming more and more exposed. Its limbs were visible all around, holding a huge hammer. Kim prepared to hurl it at his fearsome opponent. Upon being struck by the blow, the monster groans in pain and agony. Afterward, Kim thinks that, judging by the enemy's reaction, he was certainly going to win. Now he was able to track all of his opponent's movements thanks to the parasite, but he still couldn't see his weak spot, which would be exposed after a few more hits with the weapon. And no matter how fast the enemy's attacks were, he still had several limitations due to his size. As long as Kim stayed close, the monster wouldn't be able to breathe fire. The monster becomes even more enraged, filled with fury. He says that he had been holding back until now, but Kim had already become far too confident. That wasn't all of his strength, and everyone was shocked to see the king Anaxis getting serious after so many insults to the king of Naga. The enemies wanted to flee and retreat, as they believed they would likely be wiped out along with the entire place. The elf watches everything, confused, seeing that all the flood dragons were fleeing. She believes she should thank Kim, as she never thought she would see the king fight for real again. Quintus asks his opponent if he wouldn't flee with all his subordinates as well, and he's told no. In fact, he even admitted that he wanted to witness his king fight, as it would be his greatest honor. But it was clear that the Navas and Jinwu Sai, they wouldn't be able to withstand even a single blow. Kim notices that his opponent's body had become slimmer in the second phase, and the panel informs him that weak point detection has been activated. The enemy had many weak points scattered across his body, and now he would focus only on attacking, allowing the protagonist to land effective hits. Kim was going to wait for the right opportunity. The panel then turns red, informing him that the parasite had detected a very deadly threat. The battle between the king of the Naga Labyrinth and the Flood Dragon Master was now fully engaged. Kim widens his red eyes, and suddenly a massive explosion is seen, kicking up a lot of dust and dirt in the area. The protagonist stands, holding his left arm with an expression of deep pain and agony. Meanwhile, the monster fearlessly and boldly advances toward him, intent on killing him. But the protagonist quickly dodges the blow and lands a strong, powerful, and precise kick to his enemy's face. The opponent is briefly stunned after taking that hit and roars loudly, emitting a lot of light in an attempt to intimidate the boy. The boy curses, fearing the intense brightness. That dragon was now spewing a lot of fire in his direction. In just a few seconds, the entire area was filled with flames. Kim then falls to the ground after getting caught in that mess. He thinks his enemy wasn't even letting him breathe properly. Besides, you couldn't let him overwhelm him like that and needed to find a way out of that ambush. The monster then mocks his enemy, saying he looked like a little insect squirming and begging for his useless life. Kim realizes that he had to avoid being hit by the opponent's fire breath at all costs, and his weapons were useless. More flames are spewed toward him quickly. He thinks he won't be able to dodge all of it. The red panel suddenly appears, informing him that the parasite's ability immediate cognition had been activated due to the host's risk of sudden death. Kim widens his eyes at the unexpected information, looking deeply worried and desperate. He realizes that time around him had completely slowed down. It was sluggish, but still flowing, and his body felt very heavy. It seemed that only his perception had sped up a bit, even though that ability felt too strong, like a cheat in online games. The panel informs him again that the amount of energy needed for this was immense, and Kim feels the energy being drained instantly. But first, he had to dodge the attack that was coming, even though the ability was very dangerous. A huge light appears, flooding the entire large labyrinth. Suddenly, a massive explosion of fire happens right there. A lot of dust and dirt rise immediately in the area. The sound of it all was deafening for everyone, and the Flood Dragon King remained filled with rage and fury. Kim seemed more bizarre and powerful by the minute. His enemy then charges toward him, intent on attacking without mercy. Kim thinks he needs to finish this before the parasite runs out of power. He attempts an immediate strong attack, but the monster just mocks him, saying that strike was quite foolish. The red panel appears, informing him that immediate cognition had been activated, while the protagonist remains highly focused on the battle. He moves the parasite's tentacles toward the huge and heavy hammer, grips it tightly in his left hand, and delivers a precise blow to his fearsome opponent, who screams loudly in pain and agony. The red panel reappears, informing him that immediate cognition had been activated again due to an attack from the host's blind spot. Kim then realizes that the blow was probably from his enemy's tail, as the enemy stares at him with a look of deep rage and fury. The elf watches all of this with a look of great concern and tension. Dominic then notices that the fearsome flood dragon was doing something unexpected. He was kneeling before the brave and fearless boy, the king of all Naga. Kim mocks his opponent, saying that position suited him well, and wonders if he hadn't realized his true identity. He insults him, calling him a worthless, useless, and pathetic lizard. This infuriates the Flood Dragon King, enraged by the boldness. He roars loudly, preparing his fire breath with the intent to intimidate his human opponent. Kim quickly says, "Gotcha." Suddenly, a massive light floods the entire area, and a massive explosion of fire erupts again right there. Kim says that if he hadn't been able to see the enemy's weak points, that would have likely been a precise and totally fatal attack. Suddenly, the monster lets out a huge, loud roar, leaving the protagonist desperate because of the exoskeleton, causing him to call out for immediate cognition. The red panel appears, informing him that the parasite was entering hibernation at that exact moment. The monster quickly charges toward the protagonist upon learning this information. Kim tries to defend himself with all his strength, because he didn't want to die in a place like that and in such a manner. The monster roars after hearing Kim's words, intending to intimidate him. Dominic was watching everything, deeply worried, calling out to her dear and beloved master. She repeatedly denies what's happening, while the monster comments that the fragile and weak boy was surely finished and at the end of his life. Then suddenly the green panel appears several times, informing them how many seconds remain until the level 5 upgrade of the Naga Labyrinth would be completed. In a short time, the upgrade had already been completed. It also informs them that the ruler of the labyrinth, Kim Jinwoo, was fully recovering his life force, and the parasite was awakening from its hibernation with full power. At that moment, he was rising from the ashes to face his enemy again and defeat him this time. The monster watches everything in disbelief, enraged by all this information, roaring loudly with fury and rage. Suddenly, the green panel informs them that the territory of the labyrinth was being immediately expanded, leaving Draken and Dominic amazed. He also informs them that the battle was taking place within the current territory and that Naga's strength was increasing by 30%. The ruler of the labyrinth, Kim Jinwoo, had fully recovered at that moment. Suddenly, the protagonist attacks his enemy immediately. He asks how the enemy dared to humiliate him like that. The response is that nothing would change even though Kim had recovered, as he only needed to be killed again, which would be an extremely easy task. After hearing all of that, Kim orders his opponent to shut up. He sends several weapons into the Flood Dragon King's mouth using the parasite's tentacles, and even grabs more weapons that were piled nearby. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs along with many monstrous groans. Kim is impressed because his opponent was still alive even after so many bombs exploded right inside his throat. But now his weak points were exposed and his neck would soon be severed. Kim quickly charges toward the Flood Dragon King and immediately asks for a weapon from his subordinates. An enemy watches everything and lets out a loud growl, but is suddenly killed by a precise strike from the Naga King. The elf is impressed because her master had killed a hero with ease without much effort. All the other enemies are shocked that the Naga King had killed Urjad Nim. They immediately charge toward him, intending to kill him without mercy, but they are suffocated by several tentacles from the parasite. The Naga soldiers watch this in shock and disbelief. The king then asks Quintus for his sword, which Quintus hands over without hesitation. The elf observes everything, perplexed and very tense. She calls out to her master while the panel informs them of immediate cognition. Jinwoo Sai holds his huge, sharp sword in hand as the monster approaches him. He says it's okay if he can't move after the attack, but he's going to finish things once and for all. He then begins to emit an extremely strong purple light. He will use all of his power in that single strike. He delivers the blow with immense strength and power to his opponent. The monster mocks him, saying that the strike was completely useless, but then receives another one directly to his chest, which causes him to vomit a massive amount of fire. He screams in pain and agony at that moment. He roars in an attempt to intimidate the young Naga King. The cut was shallow, and as soon as the Flood Dragon King pulled his sharp blade out, he would cover the wound with his muscles and counterattack. That fearsome monster was ready to put his plan into action immediately. The Naga King uses all his strength at that moment, believing he had already defeated the enemy. Suddenly, he surprises the monster with a precise strike. The Flood Dragon King was about to give up, wondering how he had been defeated by a mere fragile mortal human. But the source of his power hadn't yet been exhausted, and he would use all the earthly jewels he possessed. Suddenly, the green panel appears, informing Kim that the parasite was requesting permission to consume the Flood Dragon King. Without hesitation, Kim immediately grants the request. And suddenly, the parasite begins to completely transform toward the fearsome monster. It seemed as if the creature had gone many years and months without eating anything. All the enemies of the Naga Labyrinth were stunned by their king. Moreover, the Nagas themselves were also impressed by what was happening, for a simple, fragile human was devouring the Flood Dragon King without mercy at that very moment. Dominic was impressed by her brave master as he was consuming the fearsome enemy in a ruthless and lethal way. Suddenly, the green panel appears again, informing them that Jinwoo Sai had absorbed the core of Anaxis, a Flood Dragon King. Dominic then becomes very excited and enthusiastic about the information she had just seen, as the parasite had even acquired a new ability at that moment. After all of this, Kim looked extremely different and much more bizarre than before. The green panel appears again, announcing a new ability and informing them that Regent Anaxis had died and the summoned flood dragons had ceased to exist. All the cute mini-Nagas were very happy and excited at that moment. The existence of powerful beings was being relentlessly shattered. All the enemies seemed to be slowly disappearing, and the intelligence of the weaker beings was deteriorating, turning them into beasts. Kim then calls for the Naga summoning at that moment, and also for the champion of the entire place, for he wanted all the energy he had to be used on the highly specialized attack unit that could be summoned after reaching Labyrinth level 5. Jinwoo Sai orders all his Nagas to attack, for he didn't want the enemies to disappear so peacefully and easily. Here, they showed no mercy, and all the opponents were to be killed and annihilated in the most painful way possible. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.